to a few things. Pursuant to the governor's order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, GLC 30A paragraph 20, as well as the select board's emergency order dated 3/16/2020. The planning board will be using remote participation for this meeting. The audio of this meeting is being recorded and will be posted to the town's web page within 24 hours in accordance with the governor's emergency actions requirements of keeping the public informed of actions during this meeting. I would ask that all remote participants attending this meeting please state your name for identification purposes each time you speak throughout the meeting. At this time, we will have a roll call for board members. David Thorne. Karen.
Present.
Okay. Josh.
Present.
Jason.
Present.
And Scott.
Present.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. First, if somebody would like to, we're trying to figure out a time to end this evening. Is there a board member that has a particular time that they would like to end this evening? Or would like to make a motion to that effect?
I'd like to make a motion to end the meeting at 10:30.
Okay, Josh has made a motion to end the meeting at 10:30. Okay. Do I have a second? All right.
Could we amend the motion to 10 o'clock?
Okay.
I just want the residents to understand
course.
that this isn't about us pushing something through to make something happen faster. It's that after 3 hours, I don't process what's being said anymore, and I need to process what's being said so that I can make the most effective decision possible. And when we go on for 3 hours, it's a lot. I've also worked all day. I think my co-board members have, and it's just a part of being able to understand and continue to be sharp while everyone's talking.
Thank you, Karen. Okay, so
Mr. Chairman, I would make an amendment to my motion.
okay, Josh has made amendment, and Karen, are you seconding that?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so Karen will second that. I guess we'll start with you, Karen. Aye. If you.
Aye. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Josh.
Aye.
All right. Jason. Jason, are you there?
I am. Aye.
Oh, okay. Scott.
Aye.
Okay, great. So we will end the meeting at 10 o'clock. So I think first would be approval of minutes. I don't know if everybody has had a chance to look at the minutes. And if somebody has any questions, I'm okay with the minutes, but I don't know if anybody else would like to take a look at them, or if they have any comments or suggestions or corrections, or.
I know we haven't talked about it, but when I read the minutes, then I think about it. When we talked about the budget for number 3, I'm just wondering if at some point in the future, could we also talk about enforcement and how we might include that into our budget in the future?
Enforcement, okay.
Yeah, but otherwise I'm fine with the minutes.
Okay, all right.
I would make a motion, including what Karen said, to approve the minutes from our previous meeting.
Okay, so Josh has made a motion. Do I have a second?
Karen, I'll second that.
Karen has seconded that. Okay. I guess starting with Karen.
Aye.
All right. Josh.
Aye.
All right. Scott
Aye.
and Jason. Are you there?
Sorry, having technical trouble here.
Okay.
Back in business.
Okay.
Aye.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So that takes care of that. Next would be approvals not required subdivisions.
You have a plan in front of you on Shaw Farm Road. It is to combine 2 pre-existing non-conforming lots. There's an existing house and a vacant lot. It's the same ownership, and you see a dotted line through the middle for the old lot line. this really doesn't need planning board endorsement. The surveyor could have done this, but he prefers to do it like this. So what you're seeing is a combination of 2 lots to make 1. And it does comply with zoning. And again, Shaw Farm Road, 21 Shaw Farm Road, in the residential 1 zoning district. The motion would be to empower the chairman to endorse, since Josh is not here.
Okay. Would somebody like to make a motion?
So can I just understand this? This person's making their lot larger?
Yes, very
Huh.
unusual, but
Yes. So I would make a motion to accept this approval not required subdivision consolidation.
Okay.
can you empower, I'm sorry, Karen, can you just empower the chair to do the
And
endorsement?
empowered Dave Thorne, chair, to do the endorsement.
All right. All right. Do I have a second?
I'll
Jason.
second.
Oh.
Okay.
Either one.
Scott is second that. All right. So I guess we'll start with you, Scott.
Aye.
All right. Karen?
Aye.
All right. Jason?
Aye.
All right. And then Josh?
Aye.
All right. I will sign that right now. It's right here at the bottom in the data.
Yep.
Okay. I'll leave this right here. Next is, oh, well, I didn't know if there was any more in regards to,
Nope, that's the only one.
okay. Next is Constitution Village surety agreement.
You had previously voted on this agreement. This is for Pout Lane within the Constitution Village subdivision. So you had previously endorsed a lot release. This is the security agreement. It just needs the chair's signature. The bond has been posted. The amount is $287,885.65, and it was peer reviewed by McClure Engineers, who's doing the inspections on this project. Again, this is Pout Lane, that little cul-de-sac at the bottom of Old Cart Path in Constitution Village.
Okay.
So my suggestion is just, again, a motion to empower the chair to sign the agreement.
Would somebody like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to empower the chair to sign the agreement for Pout Lane.
Okay, Josh has made a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Karen has made a second, or seconded this, excuse me. We'll start with Karen.
Aye.
All right. Josh.
Aye.
Scott.
Aye.
And Jason.
Aye.
Okay, great. Thank you. Do I need that? Can I do with this?
One side, please.
Oh, with this, okay.
Yep,
And right here on this line
Yep.
here, okay.
perfect.
And is
That's
there
it.
anything else? That's it, okay.
Yep.
Okay, so that's that. Didn't know if there was anything, that's pretty much it in regards to, okay. And as it is after 7:05, we're gonna open up the first public hearing for Scenic Road Work Permit, for 576 Highland Street. I'm not sure if there's somebody here from, 576 Highland Street to present.
What do you think? Bill Cotter is the gentleman's name.
I'm sorry, we have quite a few people on here, so we're looking to see if there's somebody who is here for this, 576. I don't know if you could raise your hand, or it's hard to see that we have, I believe, over 100 people on this call, so we're trying to see if there's somebody here to present for this.
We're at 290.
We're at 290, okay. We're at 290, all right. So it's hard to tell whether there's somebody here from, to present for this.
I'm scrolling through the names, David. I don't see anybody with the last name.
Okay. Either Philip Cotter or property owner Rachel Lombardo. I see two names here on this.
Well, how about if we motion to continue it?
We may have to do that if we can't
I'll
find a
second
person.
that.
I think
We're
we
just
should.
looking-
Minutes are precious. I think we should.
Yep, okay. You don't see anything on here.
I'll second it one more time.
Nothing? Okay, all right. Okay, so Karen has made a motion. And, Scott has seconded to move this for this public hearing, 576 Highland Street, to our next meeting, which is,
Not scheduled at the moment.
yeah, we're,
I thought we were doing the 18th. No,
I didn't get a quorum. Not enough people replied to me.
Okay.
I'm good with the 18th. That works for me.
Thanks, Scott.
okay,
Fine with it as well.
okay. March 18th,
Yep,
okay.
7:05.
7:05, okay. And you've made a motion to move this to 7:05 on March 18th. And Scott has seconded. So I'll start with you, Karen.
Aye.
Okay. Scott.
Aye.
All right. Jason.
Aye.
Okay. And Josh.
Aye.
Okay. All right. I'm assuming no one could find anybody that was here to present for this, so we moved on from that. Okay, next we have CRG Integrated Real Estate Solutions, 555 Hopping Brook Road. And I first want to read something quickly. The town will be asking those that want to speak during the hearing use the raise hand feature. If you are dialing in by phone, you can press 9 to indicate you would like to speak. When it is your turn to speak, you will be asked to unmute. For those on a computer, tablet, phone, will receive a message to unmute. If you are calling in by phone, you are announced by the planning board, you will need to press *6 to unmute the phone. If you are unable to find the raise your hand feature, you can send a chat to Town of Holliston requesting to speak with the planning board and will be notified. Again, I want to thank everybody for being on this call. We're going to start by speaking to somebody from CRG, but I just, again, want to thank everybody for being on this call, and if we're just asking everybody to be, I know there's some frustration, and we're just asking everybody that has questions that, to be, no one is here to, we're here to fact find and to get through this. So with that, I will open it up. I believe we have somebody from CRG here that would like to speak first. Before we get into, then we're going to talk about noise. They're going to present the noise from both, and then the board will ask some questions, and then we'll open it up to the public for questions. And then after that, we're going to talk about the traffic. So that's how it's going to go tonight. And we'll try and get through everybody's questions. That's certainly our goal. If you've heard somebody else ask the same question, maybe it's that way, you could sort of maybe think of another question. But at this point, I don't want to waste anybody's time. I believe we have somebody from CRG that would like to speak first.
That might be me. Am I audible? This is Frank Pitkinis.
Yes. Hi, Frank.
Okay, great. Well, thank you and good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. And if I can ask for a small housekeeping item, if you can unmute Chip Nyland, NYLEN, and Peter Bemis, at least for the time being. And then we have a couple of consultants that we're going to have talking also. And I think, Karen, you probably already have the list. But to reintroduce myself, my name is Frank Pitkinis. I represent CRG, who, again, would be the developer of the subject property if so approved. So tonight, we'd like to continue with the presentation of study results pertinent to the project. And we really want to touch on three topics here. First, we'd like to present our noise study results, which in summary conclude that we're in full compliance with all local regulations, and that's for both Holliston and Medway. And the results also show that we're in compliance with all state regulations. So right after that, we're going to ask for the town's peer review consultant to comment on those conclusions. That would be the first item on the agenda. The second thing we'd like to do is reiterate our traffic study results, which conclude that we're in compliance with regs, but they also illustrate that our proposed use is significantly less impactful than that which is already approved for the park. Consultant's going to touch on this a little bit, but we're basically proposing here an 84% reduction in traffic and a 27% reduction in building area. After that particular presentation, we're going to also ask for the town's traffic consultant to comment on those findings. And the third, and certainly last but not least, we're going to ask our civil engineer, Peter Bemis, to again give a summary of our revised site plan. I do understand that the town's peer review consultant has not completed his review of that, so I guess we'll wait for a subsequent meeting to get his comments on the site plan. So with that, if Greg Tachi is unmuted, Greg Tachi is our noise consultant who conducted the study for us. He's with the firm Kavanaugh Tachi. He has over 45 years of experience in acoustical and noise control fields, and he is the expert that I will hand the floor to now. You there, Greg?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, my name is Greg Tachi. Mr. Chairman, I am very pleased to be able to speak to the board tonight about a noise study that I headed for the 555 Hopping Brook warehouse. We're pleased to have this opportunity. We also are very understanding of community concern. We do many trucking facility projects around the country, and these are always very sensitive projects. Allow me to share my screen. Okay, can you see the first slide I have here?
Yes.
Okay, good. Again, my name is Greg Tachi, Kavanaugh Tachi Associates. We're located in Sudbury, Massachusetts. We have been working on this program for about 6 months now. The warehouse is shown here in, it's surrounded by parking and other truck activity. This is automobile parking down here, truck parking, truck docks, truck parking, and truck docks on this side as well, and some more parking in this area here. In December, we measured sound levels at this location, existing ambient sound levels to determine the baseline that's used in order to establish limits under the Massachusetts Department of the Environmental Protection, Mass DEP. We have, this is the Medway town line is right here. This is the old Surrey Lane neighborhood, Claybrook Farm neighborhood. Streets are labeled here. So it's a significant residential area next to the proposed project. We are concerned about sound produced by activities in the side of the building and mechanical equipment on top of the building. So we've looked at all of these things here. The locations here are the closest representative locations. Certainly we're concerned about all of the locations that surround the facility, but if we're able to satisfy requirements at these closest locations, sound levels at the outlying locations will be somewhat less and further in compliance. The project is approached from Hopping Brook Road. Hopping Brook Road terminates at a circle right here. And these are the drive entrances circulating around the building. Okay. This is a summary of the limits that we have investigated in connection with this project. The first one is the Holliston, I believe it's 2015, it might be 2017 zoning bylaw 50 dBA limit. This was brought up, this is applicable to the project. It was brought up because the original project was approved under this zoning bylaw noise restriction. In 2019, the project was, the zoning bylaw was changed in order to adopt the Massachusetts noise policy. And so we have actually considered both of them, whereas it's likely that the 2019 zoning bylaws would preempt the 2015 zoning bylaw, although we'll see what those limits are. The DP limits are slightly lower. Commonwealth of Massachusetts does have a regulation, 310 CMR 710U. It creates a condition, it prohibits creating a condition of noise, and they do not exactly define what noise is. They simply sort of use nuisance type language to describe where noise might be a problem, and make suggestions about types of improvements or reductions that could be implemented in different types of activities and equipment and so forth. Because of this, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts has authorized the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection to sort of define when a noise condition occurs. And they have done so. They define a noise condition to occur, this is roughly, when the noise produced by a facility exceeds the pre-existing background sound level by 10 decibels or more. Now, the background sound level has to be established by actual measurements on site prior to a facility operating, or if it's an existing facility, the facility needs to be shut down or some other process needs to be undertaken to determine the background. But here, this is prior to the construction of this proposed facility, and background sound levels, excuse me, as I mentioned before, were measured in December of 2020. This is legally binding, and again, as I mentioned, is the same as the Holliston 2019 zoning bylaw. Now, Medway zoning bylaw, we have taken seriously. It's advisory only in the sense that it doesn't have, it's not legally binding, but the owner of the facility, the developer, is very serious about conforming to it nevertheless. And so it has become one of the guiding codes that we've used in evaluating sound produced by this facility in Medway. In December 2020, we measured sound levels at one location, the location shown in the first slide. The dotted line are the high sound levels, those truck pass-bys on distant roads and so forth. Could be wind through trees and so forth. During this period, there was a snowstorm. That's why it was a little noisy here. The dark line is sort of the average sound level. It's what we call the energy equivalent sound level. It reflects the average. These are measurements made in hourly intervals. The bottom line is the background sound level, and the background sound level varies with time. During the day, it tends to be a little bit higher than it is at night, which makes sense. Mass DEP requires that of this, the lowest gets used. In our analysis, since this was likely depressed, it's an outlier because of snow condition, we've taken the average of the lowest. And that's not quite, but about 30 dBA. So we use 30 dBA as the background sound level for evaluating or setting design goals for facility sound at nearby residences. Measurements were made, by the way, beginning on Saturday, December 5 through Sunday, all the way up until Thursday. These are full day measurements that were made. This is the facility as it's sort of shown as in a figure taken from our computer model. Modeling was CADNA. This is a common computer model used in the industry, both around the world actually, and it conforms to ISO standard 9613-2, which is important in the sense that that sets the guidelines for sound propagation losses from these sources, shown in red as red crosses. Sound produced by these sources is computed at all of these residential locations. And knowing that we had an issue with sound, this barrier was designed for acoustical purposes. The barrier is that the berm, earth berm, is topped by an 8-foot tall wall that sits on top to create further height. This barrier height is about 38 feet off of grade in places. So it's roughly, it averages about 30 foot off of the ground in Medway off of these backyards throughout the full length. And it's will provide a significant reduction in sound level. It is among the tallest that we normally would be involved with. The big advantage of the berm, aesthetically anyways, is that it doesn't involve a 38 or a 30-foot tall wall. It involves a natural looking hill with a relatively short wall, an 8-foot tall wall on top. The wall is a solid wall. It's not a stockade fence. It would be a solid panel wall with posts stuck in the ground right on top of the berm. Down below the berm on this truck area, we've placed a number of sources for computational purposes. And what we did is use the software in order to estimate what the sound level is from each one of these sources at each and every single receptor. And then the way, since that involves a few hundred numbers, what we did is simply take the maximum at every receptor location for every source type. And in that way, we sort of modeled the worst condition. And that worst condition was then used for establishing what the height of this barrier needed to be, the height of this berm, and so forth for noise control purposes. So this is basically the way the analysis was conducted. We have also included in the analysis the stationary equipment that would be on the roof. These are makeup air units. And then we have open doors that might possibly inadvertently left open. And of course, there'll always be some doors open at some point or another. And we have an emergency generator that operates. Now, the emergency generator sound is significantly screened by the building itself from the neighborhood over here, but nevertheless, we've included it in the model. These are the estimated sound levels. This is sound produced by the warehouse emanating out of the open doors. The sound levels are here. This rooftop makeup air unit. This is the stationary equipment on the roof of the building. These are the estimated sound levels at receptors 1 through 8, and the emergency generator sound level at receptors 1 through 8. Now, the limits are summarized right here. The Holliston 2015 zoning bylaw is 50 dBA. The 2019 bylaw is, well, it's the same as Mass DEP, which is the background plus 10. Background is 30, 30 plus 10 is 40. And this is the Mass DEP regulation, which is the same as Holliston, or Holliston uses Mass DEP, and the Medway zoning bylaw 45. And we can see that the estimated sound levels for all of the continuously operating or stationary equipment on site operating together falls below any of these limits, or even particularly the lowest limit. This is again for stationary equipment. The transient sound levels are given here. Now, these are sound levels that may last for a second. For example, when a trailer disconnects, sometimes you get an impact, not all the times, but sometimes. When a truck pulls out, pulling a trailer, it accelerates, it makes a little bit of noise. Backup alarms, these are tonal backup alarms that would be fitted on all vehicles according to Department of Transportation requirements and OSHA requirements. The resident equipment here can also be fitted with broadband backup alarms, which though they make as much noise as a tonal alarm, because the sound level produced by a backup alarm is there are set limits by the Department of Labor. And these are, but the broadband backup alarms that would be used in lieu of tonal alarms on resident equipment, that's equipment that's stationed permanently at the facility, would be less detectable in the community and have a great advantage that way. Truck pass-by noise, these are trucks just traveling on site on the back of the building facing Medway, and then truck acceleration as they pull out, as I mentioned. Now, the sound level limits that the state will only enforce them on stationary equipment. There are no limits per se for transient sounds, particularly trucks potentially engaged in commerce that would be coming in and off of a public street. Nevertheless, we've sought to keep these levels down below certainly the Medway ordinance as the best we can. We have a couple of occasions that get a little bit above, that may get above 45 dBA, but these are infrequent and they're 1 second long. So this is not an outlandish impact on the community at all. I think the perception will be is, yeah, you'll notice the facility occasionally, but it's not a persistent sound produced by the facility at all. The peer reviewer retained by Holliston Planning Board to review our work generally agreed with it, but added that the regulations that I cited are actually should be met at the property lines. And so what I did is we put a receptor right at the property line corresponding to each one of the residences. Now, in these residences, we did not do the calculation for sound levels at ground level. We did it for the second floor. The higher up you are in the building, the better the chance that you'd see over the wall into the trucking area. Well, the wall is tall enough to break that line of sight. But the point is the highest levels at these residences occur really at the second floor. And so the purpose of the study is to be as conservative as possible, as reasonable. And that's what we've done by picking the second floor, 17 foot off grade for these residences. The property line, these are 5 feet above ground. And it turns out, as we had expected, the sound levels at these locations are slightly lower because they basically have a greater shielding, as I'll explain in a minute, from the berm barrier combination here.
Hey, if you wouldn't mind, Greg, I want to remind you that the township's peer review consultant, Chris from HMMH, I believe has to leave at 8 o'clock. Is that true, Chris?
Actually, no, I'm clear.
You're good. Okay. Sorry for the interruption.
Oh, no problem. I have about 3 more slides.
Okay.
This is the stationary sound levels that we computed and have shown previously in a previous slide, but here I'm making a comparison between the receptor sound levels and the corresponding property line sound levels. Where the receptor sound levels are higher than the property line sound levels, they are identified in red. And you can see most of the sound levels are a little bit higher at the residences than they are on the property line. So, you know, it doesn't really change any of the conclusions that have been reached. The same is pretty much true for the transient sources, truck movements and so forth in the yard behind the building. Now, how does a barrier work? Well, first of all, a question did come up about foliage. Foliage does produce a small amount of attenuation as sound propagates through it. We have not included foliage in our models, so we haven't taken that advantage. There may be ever so slightly more attenuation or reduced sound levels as a result of foliage, but it is minor, and so we've not included in the model as we've been asked about. So I only bring that point up here because it was a question that did come up. Barriers, basically, the effective height of the barrier is, here's the source, here's a receiver. This is arbitrary, source and receiver. There's a ray of sound that would, without the barrier, would go directly from the source to the receiver. With a barrier in place, there is a diffracted path to the top edge of the barrier and then down to the receiver. And the performance of this barrier to reduce sound level is related to this, what's called effective barrier height. It's shown here as HS. Well, if this receiver were actually a little bit closer to the barrier, the effective barrier height actually gets better, which is why the sound levels of the property line in most cases were lower. And this is shown here. The black is the original sketch that came from the ISO 9613 standard. And this is the receiver moved over to this location here. This is the line of sight from the source to that new location. And this is the effective barrier height, slightly larger than the original barrier height. That's just a brief explanation. I am finished. I conclude here that sound levels produced by the facility will conform to all of the applicable limits. And perceptually, I think you can say that occasionally you'll hear some activity. You probably won't ever notice anything from stationary equipment, any noise from stationary equipment. I'd be pleased to answer any questions.
And then we'll go to Chris after that. I guess we'll start with Scott. Did you have any questions? You there, Scott?
Yeah, hang on. Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, sorry. Having trouble getting you unmuted.
Oh, that's all right.
No questions at this time.
Okay, thank you. Karen?
Yeah, hi. I guess I do have a question on a comment that you made, not only about the trees, but were the trees still standing when you took these measurements? Because they're no longer there.
They're no longer there, but this is spurious sound when we measure background. It's coming.
If you could just answer my question, were the trees there or not?
Yeah, some of the trees were, some weren't.
Okay, and then my next question is, you're citing snowfall from Worcester, and we are kind of far from Worcester. So what I've just read is that would have an impact on the sound, right? It can act as a blanket, it can absorb sound. So I'm wondering why you would use Worcester as your snowfall.
Sure. Worcester was the closest location that we're able to find weather data for our area. And that's always a problem. We usually have to refer to the nearest airport to get this kind of information. And so that's the closest location that we're able to find for this level of information.
Yes, but that does concern me when we're talking about stationary sources that are 31, 32, 34, 33. We're not far away from that 40, you know? So if snow
right.
is helping, then we're awfully close and we can't retract that. So I do have concerns about that. I'm also concerned that in the transient sources, there's no discussion of a dumpster. And, you know, I think nothing's scarier than a clown, and I think nothing is louder than an empty dumpster being put down.
You bring up a couple of good points. Let me respond on the weather. The effect of snow on the ground is to depress the background sound level to lower the applicable limits. So it actually is to your advantage. It forces the limits downward. So there is an advantage to having had snow on the ground at the time.
Right, but what about when it's not there? Then the sound would be louder.
Yeah, the sound would be louder, which would have the effect of raising the applicable limit. And that's less to your advantage. We'd like to have as low a limit for you as possible. And so this actually represents a condition that were we to do this in summer, we'd probably find higher background sound levels leading to a higher limit and a lower barrier. And I think the way it's played out, I think this is to a great advantage to you.
So Greg, I'm sorry to interrupt, but that's a long way of saying that this is a very conservative study, right? I mean, with consideration of snow, there's a baseline lower.
That is correct.
Right. Okay.
All right. Karen, did you have any more questions?
Did we hear anything about the dumpster?
We do not have a dumpster in our model. It is a good point, and frankly, I don't know where the plan is to put it. That's something I would have to respond back to you with.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
You were talking also about cold versus hot. What about wind? The wind, obviously, does that push things, the sound? You know, it could be a windy day or versus a day that there's no wind.
ISO 13, the standard requires, provides computation methods that assume downwind propagation. In other words, the possibility of having a wind condition that deflects sound down to otherwise raise sound and to reduce the barrier effectiveness is already included in the computations by standard. So it is an important effect. It is an important consideration, but is part of the ISO 9613 standard.
Okay. I just know when we walked up there, I don't know, about a month ago, a few of us walked up there, and in the part that was, the trees have been cut, and the sound coming from down below, I guess, must have been the rest of the park. I could hear stuff from the rest of the park coming up. I don't know where it was coming from, but I could hear a lot of stuff coming up. It sort of seemed like it was coming up the hill into that area from, again, what other businesses are down below. So I just was sort of wondering, and again, it was kind of a windy day. There was certainly snow up there that day, but I did notice hearing a lot of sounds from, and you could even hear, it sounded like a highway or something. So I don't know if that's 495 that I heard, or maybe it was 16, I don't know. But I could hear something else. So definitely, certainly concern, obviously, that I could hear these noises. And you had mentioned something about a generator. Yeah. The generator. I'm sorry?
No, go ahead. In this area, local traffic and even 495 contribute to background sound under certain circumstances.
Okay. And that's sort of downhill from it, from where we're talking. My assumption is.
Mm-hmm. It's related to wind direction.
Okay. The generator you had mentioned is behind the building, but I don't know if you could talk a little bit about that, a little more about that. I mean, I'm assuming that the size generator that you would be using for this building, there certainly should be a lot. I would assume that there's a lot of noise with that, even though it's behind the building.
Yes, we have been concerned about it. In our modeling, I believe we have a 1,000 kilowatt generator that we used. I'm not sure it's going to be that big. It would be in an acoustical enclosure. So it essentially, is a large truck engine, so to speak, that's enclosed. So it has to, can't ignore it. It needs attention. It would operate for about an hour once a week for testing, for maintenance purposes, and then, of course, during power outages.
So it would turn on once a week, and I'm assuming that's generated by natural gas, I guess?
I don't know. We've assumed that it's diesel fuel. It may be either.
Okay, all right. So it could be diesel fuel. I don't know what the sound difference is in regards to diesel versus, I know diesel's loud, but versus propane or gas or whatever. I don't know if there's a difference in terms of sound.
There is. It's slight. It's slight. It's about 2 decibels. And we took the louder, the noisier of the two.
Oh, you did. Okay. So you're okay. So diesel. I'm assuming you took diesel because that's louder. I think.
Yes.
I believe. Okay. Okay. And I guess in regards to the truck noise, that seems to be for me the biggest, just scratching my head. It just seems like that's a loud driving trucks around, backing them up. I don't know if you could talk a little bit about that. I know you had that in your presentation, but I'm just trying to understand this a little bit. And we have a 30-foot berm and then 8 feet wall on top of that. But I don't know how somebody's not going to hear something, backing up, a truck backing up or a diesel engine or unhooking something. I guess if you could go into that a little bit more so that everybody can understand what that sound is. I just don't know what that is. If I'm in one of those houses behind there, I want to know what that sound is. I know you've got numbers here, but is there a better way to describe that so that everybody on this call can understand what that is? Am I listening to somebody shut a door in a house? Am I hearing something that's, I'm just trying to describe it so everybody, the couple hundred people that are on this call can understand with a berm that size, we all understand, am I still going to hear a truck, but I'm not going to hear it that well? Am I going to hear it beeping? Am I going to hear the backup? I don't know if you could get into that a little bit more so that we all kind of understand what that noise is, if there's a way to do that.
The best way to do it is when you start comparing it with other things, it becomes out of context, doors closing, air conditioning in the room and so forth. The best way to consider it is by comparing it with the background sound levels that were measured prior to the facility being built. Those are the sound levels we measured in December. And you'll find that during the day, the estimated sound levels from activities will be below the sound level produced by wind and distant traffic and so forth. We run into this problem all the time, but for us, that's the way we grab a hold of how people are going to respond to sound levels. And it's going to be more, truck activities will be a little bit more audible at night. It's not going to be loud, but it'll be in the distance. And during the day, probably not audible very well at all because of background sound levels in the area. So I don't know how to, I'd give you some more appreciation for that. What we could do is open it back up and look at my slides again if you'd like me to do that. So.
Well, I've heard over the years people that I know or that I've known that have lived near a facility kind of like this, and I know that they said they can hear this noise in the middle of the night. They can hear that, off in the distance, even with barriers. So I'm trying to give everybody on this call an understanding. Are we talking about something that I'm going to hear something that's just sort of a small noise, or am I going to hear something that's very, right now, what I'm thinking, I'm going to hear something, if I'm living over that other side of the farm, I'm going to hear a loud truck and a beeping, backing up noise, even though that berm is there. To me, that I don't quite understand, and again, maybe it's me, maybe I'm the only one on this call, but I don't understand, I'm not getting a grasp of am I going to hear just a small sound of a truck backing up, or am I going to hear, something fairly large? I mean, again, what I'm saying is I feel like at this point there's a berm there, but I'm still going to hear an engine. I'm going to hear that backing up, and I'm going to hear that beep, 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 and I'm going to hear the trucks unhooking. But if you could maybe go into that a little more and explain.
Sure. Yes. The
There, and again, I
loud
apologize. I may be the only one on this call, but I'm just trying to get this. I'm trying to understand this.
The loud
Thank you.
sounds will be very distant and be relatively faint. And many of the sources we've assumed here may not occur. I've seen truck connects and disconnects that don't make any noise at all. And so we've just taken the worst case, and every opportunity to take the worst case in order to be sure that we're not missing something. And I can appreciate your concern and the difficulty of trying to grasp what the future impact is. But the best I can say is that it's going to be a distant sound. It'll be faint. You're not going to hear it all the time. But I can't say it's going to be inaudible. That's not the case at all. It's going to be greatly reduced from what it might otherwise be. The other thing that it could be done, and that could be done graphically, and haven't got it prepared right now, but to compare it with the existing sound levels in the environment. And we're looking at sound levels produced by this facility with the barrier in place that are considerably lower than the kinds of transient sound levels that are now occurring in the environment through other sources, obviously not trucks, but that certainly might help you appreciate what has been done here by way of instituting noise control in the design.
Okay. Again, my concern was standing up on that hill where all the trees were cut down, and I could hear, I'm assuming it's 495 or maybe it was 16, I don't know, but I could hear the traffic, and I could hear other stuff from Hopping Brook, the other business part, down below, coming up that hill. I don't know where the sounds were coming from, but I could hear that. And so I'm now thinking where I'm standing is now going to be, it's going to have a lot of noise, and there's houses right behind that. So I'm just trying to understand the noise level. Two other questions I had, and then I think there's a couple other members that had some questions, but one was, and I'll just put this into one more question, plowing. And how that's a huge area to plow in the wintertime and the noise from that. And then the other thing is there any understanding, we talked about, we didn't talk about anything with tar versus, I guess, grass. So for instance, does the tar, I'm assuming that tar makes the sounds greater. That's what I'm assuming. By having tar, the whole thing's going to be paved, does that make all of this a lot noisier? Excuse me, I can't speak tonight.
May I?
Truck traffic and,
I'd be pleased to comment on that. Obviously, paved areas do reflect sound. Landscape areas tend to absorb sound. And now, the problem is the practicality of trying to have soft ground with trucks running over it. That just doesn't work. But it has been an effort here, as is in all places similar to this, is to limit the amount of paving to what's needed for safe operation of vehicles. And you bring up a good, it is important to have as much landscaping as possible, but within the domain of having safe operation of trucks is a certain paved area. And I can't, although that's a civil engineering question as to whether or not the paved area can be reduced. Certainly, there really wouldn't be much of a reduction of sound level by reducing the paved area because the vehicles will always be on a paved surface. So I can't see any practical reduction that might be had by reducing the paving area. But that's a civil engineering question.
Okay. And then plowing, I'm assuming too. That's another thing that we have to consider plowing at night or whenever they're plowing. And I'm using a building of this size. I'm assuming they're using huge, large excavators or something to plow this. So I'm assuming that's noise too. You know, when there's snow, obviously that's not all the time, but that's diesel engines or something else that's going to be plowing. So
it's an emergency condition with, you know, trucking that act, you know, for plowing. And yeah, it'll be a little bit noisier because we've got a plow blade scraping along the grade or along the ground. So, but it's not a frequent occurrence, and certainly it's an occurrence in your on neighborhood streets.
okay. Well, I probably should let some other members speak here. I guess I'm still not quite 100% understanding the truck noise. That's my concern. I mean, certainly there's some other things, but I should probably let some other people. I think Karen has had it mentioned. I'll go back to her, but I'll go to Jason and see if Jason has anything. Any questions?
Thanks, Dave. Hey, Greg, would you mind bringing up the transient noise levels one more time, that slide?
Sure. Yeah, are you talking about the levels, or you want to see the monitoring data?
No, you had a result. It looked like a at every receptor point, you had a sound level, and it was somewhere 40s, 50s. That's what I'm remembering.
Okay, sure. I think it's this chart right here. Is that it?
We don't see anything yet. You get to try. You get to share your screen.
Let me see if I hold on one second while I make sure I'm sharing. Sorry, I was not sharing, and can you see the screen now?
We can.
This is the chart you're referring to?
The after analysis, is that the post analysis?
These are the sound levels produced by transient activities with the barriers in place. Yes.
Okay.
I also had one that reported the property line measurements, the property line estimated sound levels as well. Would you like to see that?
Yeah. Let's take another look at that.
That's this one right here.
Okay, that has everything on it. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm just going off memory here, so bear with me. You said that the ambient noise was 30. The regulation is ambient plus 10, so that makes it 40.
That's right.
I'm looking here, truck passed by, I see 41, 42, 41, 41, 42. So a few of them just above 40. Let's truck accelerating. All right, 38, 37, 41, 43, 46, 45. Down the bottom, trailer disconnect. Those are quite a bit more than 40. You know, I just wanted to point this out for everybody that given the number of trucks that I think are being proposed, I would be very curious to hear what frequency these trucks, I mean, is it one every, is it one every 10 seconds? We'll be going by that part of the building. Is it one every 20 seconds? Is it one every 30 seconds? I'd be very curious to hear about that.
Yeah, those are important. First of all, the regulations, Mass DEP imposes those on stationary equipment, not transient or trucking movements like this. So not that I'm trying to get out of it. I mean, we made this barrier as tall as feasible in order to reduce sound levels, to control stationary levels, but stationary equipment levels, but also to control these truck movement sounds. And again, these are the worst that occur in terms of how often they occur. And that's an important question. I don't have that traffic data. That should be available from the owner and or from the civil engineer, and it would be interesting to try to reflect that onto the existing background sound levels to get a comparison.
Yeah,
I'd like to have that
I'm-
information right now.
I'm just trying to wrap my head around, you think of a transient being something that's extremely intermittent, right? So it's a truck going by, and maybe 30 seconds later, another truck goes by. Maybe, 5 minutes later, another truck goes by. Probably somebody lives on like 126, for example, right? And I'm starting to, just trying to understand and wrap my head around, what is it intermittent? First of all, is I think a valid question to ask. And if it is intermittent, how intermittent is it? And I think that's worth knowing. Is it every 10 seconds or, or every minute?
Josh, this is Frank Pitkinis, and I may be speaking out of turn because I'm not the traffic engineer, but Scott Thornton, remind me, we have 1,300 ADTs, right? And a portion of that 1,300, I recall, was about 300 trucks. If I'm wrong, correct me, chime in and correct here. And if you just divide that by 24, it's what is that number, 12? So 12 trucks per hour every 5 minutes. So that would give you just kind of a thumbnail sketch as to how frequent these would be. It's not every 10 seconds. It's not every 2 seconds. But if you were to take the amount of trucks that we project, and if I'm off, I understand I'm off. I'm just trying to give you a kind of a feeling of what I think you're asking is, about 12 trucks an hour.
The other thing I might add here is that notice we have not done any averaging here. These are not average sound levels. These are maximum sound levels that occur. And for any event, they'll not likely reach these levels. Were we to do this as an average sound level, the average would be very, very low. But I don't think that gives a fair picture of the, what people's perception might be, which is why we use maximum sound levels. So again, every effort has been made here to have this conservatively high or to be as protective as possible to the community. And this is what we normally do in the other, couple hundred facilities we've worked in around the country.
Greg, this is Chris Mange. I'm the peer reviewer for the noise for the town. It might be worth just showing that ambient graph again to remind the community members what the typical daytime average background sound levels are. Because I think that will help put this in context. I think they're all thinking about the 30, which does occur, late at night on some nights. But you might just make that comparison because I think that will help provide a little context.
Right. Probably the maximum tended to be around 48. These are 1 second events, and they might occur, well, in the whole facility, they might occur once every 5 minutes, but nearest a single receptor, that would be maybe once every 2 hours. And so the sound levels that you see here are not going to occur every 5 minutes. They're going to occur maybe once or twice a night, depending upon where the location of that particular event is. And so this is, again, we're looking at the worst picture, and these aren't going to occur. We're not going to have a trailer moving in and out of the same place every 5 minutes. It doesn't work that way. It's probably once a night. And so once a night, you might get the 48, which would be, or once a day, 48. So, and here we're looking at transients that are much higher than 48 for the most part. Over here, they got to be low. But these events that we're looking at are more like once a night or 2 or 3 times a day, not at these, they're not occurring over and over and over again. As far as trucks driving back up and down the driveway in the yard, yeah, that will be more frequent, but that's a lower sound level.
I guess, Greg, one of the points that I was thinking about here is that if you look at the heavy, black line and
Yes.
where it is typically during the daytime hours, it's in the low to mid 40s typically during the day. And so these maximum events that would occur maybe in the mid to high 40s are not even going to be heard as even twice as loud as the current existing sort of average sound level. I think that's the kind of context that the community members might benefit from.
The other thing is that these are transient sound levels that are one, a couple of seconds in duration, and they're considerably higher than what we're expecting from the facility. So that's another way of looking at it as well.
No,
If I could, sorry, if I could, one more question, Greg, for you. Your model, including the analysis of the transient levels, that includes the reflection off the building itself. Is that right?
Yes, it does.
Yeah. Okay. That's all I've got. Thanks.
All right. And the other thing too was, we're speaking here, if I'm in one of those houses, your study, is that in regards to people with their windows open? Is it with their windows shut, or is this just sound going to that area? So for instance, if I'm living in one of those houses and I've got my windows open, or it's summertime and I'm sitting on my deck or terrace or lawn or whatever reading a book, your study is the sound that is against that house. I'm just
let me respond. Yes, these are sound levels outdoors at the facade of the house, outdoors, not indoors. The sound level indoors with windows closed would be about 20 to 25 dB lower. With windows open, they'd be about 15 dB lower. So if we had a sound level of say 45 with windows closed, the sound level inside 45 minus 25 is 20. 20 is down below the ambient sound in your house from appliances and heating systems and so forth, for the most part. With windows open, it's louder. 45 minus 15 is 30. 30 is still low. It's well below what you might find for appliances and heating systems and so forth in a home. Have I answered your question?
Well, I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page. If this is with the windows, your study is with the windows shut, and this is not inside. This is somebody out in their backyard. If their windows are open, this is a completely different. There's a completely different sound, or there's a different. This is basically outside with the windows shut. We're not talking about somebody inside their house hearing this, or with their windows open. So I just want to make that clear for everybody that's on this call.
Yes, this is outdoors, and sound levels indoors with windows open or closed will be considerably lower.
But if the windows are open, that's different too. So
yes,
anyway.
That'd be about a 15 decibel loss with windows open and about a 25 with windows closed.
Okay. Josh, did you have any questions? Josh, you there?
Sorry, I was having some trouble unmuting. I did have some questions, but Jason pretty much covered them. The stationary noise really is what caught my eye, especially the trailer disconnect. It doesn't take more than a few seconds to wake somebody up at night, especially. And I think that's probably what, I don't want to speak for the residents, but I would definitely say I think that might be a concern right there, the nighttime noise. I mean, people are working during the day. So that was really got covered by Jason, but I did have another question. And that would be, Greg, did your model compute for the sound received at each location from one single source or from many sources operating at once?
Many sources, but not operating simultaneously. The only
now, I'm sorry, I have a question. At the facility, will there be many sources operating at once?
There will be
truck sources. I'm talking specifically.
Yes, there'll be stationary sources operating continuously. Those operate at once. The transient sources, it'd be nearly impossible for them to occur simultaneously because these are very, very short duration. And so we have not considered them operating. It's not reasonable to consider them operating simultaneously, but the stationary sources, yes.
Thank you.
Was that your, do you have any other questions, Josh?
I do not, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much.
All right. And then I didn't know if Chris was going to be presenting or if he just,
Could I just ask one more thing?
oh, certainly, Karen, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just feel like something's dangling there that I think at least needs to be raised as another concern. In my experience, a truck every 5 minutes is going to be an overlap. These are not going to be independent trucks coming all by themselves, and only because they're coming every 5 minutes, only one truck will be there at a time. Trucks will be idling while other trucks are backing up. I even question what are the beeping decibels of a truck backing up, and I believe that that is higher than what we're talking about here. So I'm not sure that we should wash over the amount of traffic that we're talking about at the facility, and the fact that trucks will be coming in and out at the same time. They will be overlapping with each other. If that wasn't the case, you wouldn't want so many truck bays.
It takes a while to, may I respond? It takes a while to unload a truck, and you're right.
That's my point, actually.
There'll be, but the loading is done with a truck sealed against the building.
But it has to, it backs up against it, and that makes noise, and then another truck is coming. It's just the way the statement is being made. The statement is being made as though one thing happens at a time, when in fact we know collectively many things are going to be happening at the same time. That is only my point.
Okay, and in a sense, what we've done is this might be operating while this is operating. This resident here is going to be more affected by this activity than this activity. And what we've reported is this activity. Now, what would sound, how would sound here add to sound occurring over here? It'd probably be negligible, but by taking the maximum sound level from that might occur from all of these events, we hope to have covered that possible circumstance where this sound is occurring at the same time as that sound there with respect to R5, as an example. But yeah, I understand your question, and we hope that we've covered that exigency by taking the loudest sound levels that are likely to occur from any of these sources and using that as a basis for design of this wall.
Can I also add, Greg, that, you know, when I talk about, you know, 300 trucks, again, that's the max, and I just kind of pulled in an average to give everybody a thumbnail sketch. Consider, however, that a lot of those trucks, possibly half, if you were to use that same logic, would be going on the building side furthest from the receptors, right? So that's one point. And Karen, your previous question about dumpsters, I don't know if anybody directly answered it for you. You know, we're not talking about overhead dumps on these dumpsters. If that's a concern, these are more like roller dumpsters. More oftentimes than not, they are in the building. So if you can imagine a long dumpster inside a building on the other side of a dock door, meaning inside the building, and when it gets picked up, a truck pulls up, opens up a dock door, and it slides onto the equivalent of flatbed. So that's one thing that would likely be the dumpster. Another thing you can consider is dumpsters could be put on the other side of the building furthest away from these receptors.
Do you have any more
Thank
questions,
you.
Karen? Okay, thank you, Karen.
If I, David, if I, one other question.
Certainly.
Karen kind of sparked something in my mind here, and I wonder if Greg Tauchi would be so kind to maybe do an analysis. I'm going off kind of what he said, that it would be, I think, unreasonable to assume all of these sources would emit all at the same time. I wonder if an analysis could be done with, say, half of them, and see what those levels are.
Okay.
That's all.
Are you still there? Okay. Okay. You're all set, Jason? Okay. All right. And I just want to make sure if there's anybody else. Scott, I don't know if there was anything else or?
No, I think everything's been covered from my end at this point. Thank you.
I didn't know if Chris wanted to speak in regards to.
Sure. I've been sort of taking a few notes as we've been, listening, and to what some of the concerns of the community members are. One of the things that was just mentioned had to do with, the addition of individual, pass-by events or, transient events and what the effect of that addition might be. One thing I was looking at in Greg's report was the truck pass-by sound levels at the residences, as at the residences, the second floor heights, and they range from about 40 to about 43. And late at night on a really quiet night, that might be heard as maybe about twice as loud as the background, not a lot louder than that. The addition of two truck pass-bys that happen to go by each other, let's say, would directly opposite one of these receivers, that would add to about 46. So you have 43 plus 43 equals 46 decibels. That's their decibels are logarithmic, and that's why they add that way. So it's kind of like vibrations from earthquakes, which are also logarithmic. Any case, so we're not looking at a doubling of the numbers. We're not talking about 86 decibels. We're talking about 46, and so it's a slight increase. It would be like barely perceptible, where you would have two instead of one. Now, if you had 3 or 4, you might notice that 3 or 4 trucks in the same place, all moving about at the same time. That might increase sound levels 5, 6 decibels. But again, it's not a giant increase. These trucks will be audible at night, with your windows open in the summertime. In a quiet background, you'll hear them go by. But another way of thinking about it is because of the earth berm and the wall that's in between, the quality of the sound of the truck pass by will be very different from what you would hear if there was no shielding, like from the berm. The shielding of a berm or a wall reduces the high frequency, the high pitched sounds much more than the low pitched sounds. So you wouldn't perceive the same sort of character of sound. It would be much more muted, muffled, if you will, like through a window or through a closed home, rather than as sharp as it would be if it were unaffected by the shielding. So those were a couple of points that I wanted to make. Let me see. The downwind sound propagation that Greg mentioned, the model does incorporate an assumption of sort of a worst case wind condition. When I reviewed the study that Kevin Otachi did, I was actually really quite impressed with how conservative it was. I've done a lot of peer reviews in my career, and they're certainly not all this carefully done and as conservative with these assumptions. Having him having taken the maximum sound levels, him having evaluated all of these transient sources, which are not even regulated, I think shows a commitment to revealing everything that the site is likely to produce, and in an honest and conservative way. So I approved the study, and I felt as though it was carefully done and appropriately conservative for the community. So I think that's probably all I had for the moment.
Is there any difference between, let's say, trucks? So for instance, let's say, I don't know, I'm going to make this up, Nike comes with a load of, an 18-wheeler, and they're driving an international truck. Again, I don't know whether the International is still in business, and that truck has an International diesel engine in it. The next guy shows up and he's got a load of, I don't know, apples. I'm just, again, making this up, an 18-wheeler, and he's driving a Kenmore, whatever truck there is, and that truck has a different type of diesel engine in it. Is there any difference in one diesel engine to another in terms versus sound? Again, sort of a random question, but
Well, there's some difference. There's some variability. One thing that we often, but I don't think it's really large unless the trucker has modified their muffler. And I'm sure many of you have heard, on the road occasionally, particularly loud vehicles, particularly when they're using their engine braking. And I would argue that if there's any issues with engine braking on this facility, which there usually are not, because the vehicles are traveling quite slowly, that signs could be put up to prevent truckers from using engine brakes on the property, which can be loud. But I mean, there might be an occasional vehicle that would be more noticeable than others, but I don't think it's going to be the rule of thumb.
I think that's a good idea, Chris. The grade here is a bit on the steep side. That'd be a tempting thing to use the engine brakes. So
Yeah.
it should be signed to prevent that.
Yeah, that would be a good idea if there's grading. Yeah, indeed.
okay. One more, I'd like to see if we have town council on this call, and I don't know if he has any questions for anybody at this point. I don't know if he's...
One minor question I had is whether in terms of the backup noise, and I know it's only a small component of the noise, and I've had this question before, if they are allowed to require that trucks not use their backup alarms on site.
I have been many trucking facilities, and we've never recommended that. It should not be done. You should never shut off backup alarms. The Department of Labor does allow it under certain circumstances, but it involves cordoning off an area and having an inspector keep people out. So that's not practical in a trucking facility.
That was my understanding. I just wanted to be sure, because I've seen that condition before, and I know that it butts up against safety issues. Otherwise, I don't have any questions as it applies to the kind of issues that I'm talking about, but I'm just trying to keep track of the things that we would impose as conditions, and we'll probably rely on Chris a bit for that. So.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yep.
I think at this point, I'd like to open it up and see if I do see quite a few questions. And is there a way to see how the list, I can only see 4 people here that have questions. I'm assuming is Terry the first one that's got a question? Okay, so I see Terry is here. Terry, if you'd like to unmute yourself and ask a question. And again, if everybody could, if you could state your name and your address, that would be great. Thank you very much.
Mangan from 2290 Washington Street. A considerable amount of this traffic is going to be diverted from Hopkin Brook down toward Beaver and the Fortune Boulevard. I understand there's been some traffic considerations to coming out of Hopkin Brook. I'm not entirely sure if the log jam that will be created for folks trying to go shopping off of Fortune or down at Stop and Shop have been addressed. As far as noise goes, living on Washington Street, and your own figures indicate there'll be at least a 26% increase in traffic. We're not really sure of that because we had some fuzzy math at the last meeting. That is going to impact us. It is going to impact our environment in terms of the trees and bushes that are on our front lawns. It's going to impact the road, the wear and tear. It's going to affect eventually the value of our property because the Mass DOT, while it's given approval to all of this, doesn't live here. And I think that you are going to see a number of signs as you drive up our way saying no to this project. I am asking the board to consider saying no as well. And having worked with consultants, I was a condominium senior manager for over 30 years. My favorite one once said to me, dazzle them with brilliance, but baffle them with blarney. They get paid well to do one or the other. That's all I have to say.
Thank you very much.
Steve,
At this point,
just that you just ask people to limit it to questions and not making statements.
okay. If we could, at the moment, we're going to talk about traffic after this. If we could talk about questions, if people could ask questions through me in regards to the noise, that would be great. And then after this, we're going to go into, they're going to answer some of the traffic questions. And if you could address them as questions, because we're really looking to have them answer the questions in regards to statements. If you could, at this point, we're just trying to get questions. So thank you very much. The next person I see here is Tom Fitzgerald. I should put my glasses on.
Thank you. Tom Fitzgerald, 61 Rockland Street. My question actually goes back to last week regarding the Economic Development Committee's letter in support of this project. In the last meeting, I presented a few facts in terms of the overall impact of this and a lot of factors that have not been looked at, like could home values drop? The list goes on. Do we have adequate emergency services? What is the impact to downtown Holliston? I have a host. I know you're trying to control this to noise, and I don't want to make this a statement, but the question for the planning board is, do you support the Economic Development Committee's letter of recommendation for this project? Do you accept their $1 million figure, even though no costs have been associated with that? And, are you in agreement that this would provide a net positive economic impact for the town?
What's that? Yeah, we have to. At this point, we have our town council on this call, and so there's certain questions that I would refer to our town council in regards to questions. And we're really trying to stick to the noise at this point. Again, I thank you for the Mr. Fitzgerald for your concerns.
Dave, I would like to respond part to Tom's question.
Okay, all right.
I'm not speaking for the whole board. I'm speaking for myself. I have read the Economic Development Committee letter, and at this point, I feel that the letter was presented to us after an incomplete conversation. They held a public hearing. They held a meeting, and they took public comment while we were in the middle of a public hearing. Because of that, they could not entertain conversation around traffic. For this, I feel as though, unfortunately, the conversation doesn't have a full evaluation of economic costs and economic benefits. I would really prefer, although I don't know if this would happen, that they hold another meeting and present another letter to us. But right now, that's how I view that letter. I feel that it is incomplete. And I don't know if any of my other board members feel that way, but that's how I feel while I read it. And I was at those meetings.
Thank you, Karen. I don't know.
Here,
Josh,
I second. Here, I second.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, again, thank you for the question, Mr. Fitzgerald. Next, we have Susan W.
Hi, I'm Susan Woodrow, and I live at 136 Union Street. I've been in Holliston for 43 years. I'm going to be very brief.
Thank you.
Because this is a 3-hour meeting and we've already used more than, half of it. We've used half of it on the first presentation. So thank you for hearing for us. I want to thank the planning board first. You're getting attacked from all sides and you are a group of volunteers who serve a crucial function for our town right now. We the residents are seeking a good faith negotiation on this issue. We hope the other side is also seeking that. I want to ask this question tonight. Are these two issues which are being presented about noise and traffic the only two issues that you have to hear tonight in order to make a decision about whether or not to pass this to say yes or no to this special permit? Because we have a lot. This is meant to be a continuation of questions from last week. We've done a lot of research and we are hoping to be able to make ourselves and the information that we found heard so that you are not just going with less than the amount of data that the process may be going too fast for our town to be able to handle it. So from my point of view, sitting in this seat, wondering if you're going to pass this special permit or not, seeing the time ticking away and we haven't even started the second presentation. Is this the goal for tonight to hear everything you have to hear and make a decision, or will there be more meetings? Thank you for hearing me.
There will be more meetings. There's still information that has to be presented to us. So there are more meetings. I didn't know if that was your last. Okay. I believe the next person is Terry.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Terry Stifler. I live at 58 Front Street in Holliston. And I've been a resident in Holliston for about 11 years now. And first and foremost, I would like to follow on to something that Susan just said. As far as this special permit goes, which is asking that 15,000 square feet of this this distribution center is going to be allowed to have hazardous and toxic wastes stored there. I absolutely would like to ask the board to reject this. That is my top question, my top first point that I would like to make. I'm concerned about our roads, potentially, if this is carried along the roads. I'm concerned about the water systems close by and various other things. But one of my big questions is tied in with the environmental question that I asked in the previous meeting, and we understood that this meeting was going to be an extension of that for additional questions. So I hope it's okay if I put that forward. First of all, I went back out to look at the MIPA permits for this that are required. The only two that have been done are 1982 and 2002. And then there was another update that was put in recently, but that was primarily based on the traffic. I'm very concerned at some of the process that has been followed by the team, although barely within the regulations. They've gone out, for one thing, to look. They requested from the town when they put in an RDA, which was the first thing they put in, versus an ANRAD, which is the other process that could have been followed. They actually made it so that the community could.
We just have to keep the questions. I'm sorry, we've just got a lot of questions. So if you could, I'm sorry, I apologize. I'm just trying to get everybody done.
Okay, well, my question.
To the noise.
I will.
I apologize.
Okay, all right. My question is, can I finish?
Oh, yes, yes.
Okay, thank you. Well, my question is, for one thing, they asked the Conservation Commission to go out in November, a day after Thanksgiving, to go out and look at wetlands and vernal pools.
We're really trying just to keep this to the noise at this moment. Thank you very much. Thank you. I apologize. We're just trying to keep this to the noise. I apologize. So.
It's really not fair to the community, I feel. Then I will ask one thing on the noise. Did they take the additional noise and add it to the transient number, or did they strictly have a straight number there? It looks as though it was just a transient and then it was just a straight number for the trucks. Shouldn't those be added together if there is a transient steady state number? And then on top of that, you should add the additional noise that comes from the vehicles. And that
would be you bring up a good point. We did not, it's a very small increase, but it is something that should be done.
But if you added 35 to 30, it goes up to 65, which is beyond the 50 dBs, correct?
No, it does not.
Why?
30,
Chris had a good answer. I'm sorry, go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, 30 plus 35 is, I believe, about 37. Okay. It's logarithmic addition. It's a not arithmetic, it's logarithmic. And you bring up a good, it is, it keeps people out of acoustics.
I actually have an engineering background, but I haven't in a while. But I did question that you didn't even factor in the transient.
Yeah, it's going to be small because with the stationary sound levels down in the low 30s, below 35, and transients, starting to get 10 dB above it, the contribution of the stationary sources to the transient sound levels is small. But
the second question is, you did this between December 5th and December 10th. Isn't that a very quiet time of the year, which is Christmas time? Probably not much business going on in the place. Probably not many cars out on the traffic, anything that's happening.
Yes, that is correct.
So the low level you have is lower than probably what it would be on a normal day, say of September.
And that's exactly why we did it. It holds us to a more stringent standard, right? It's a more conservative way than that study. Is that correct, Greg?
That's right, yes.
So what I've done for all of our consultants with all these studies is I said, guys, look, be real, be thorough, be conservative. I don't want any surprises. I don't want any operating surprises after we invest in the building and build it. So you're exactly right. That particular method produced an overly conservative result, as the township's peer consultant already.
For me, I would argue that that was not more conservative. I would argue that that was less conservative, because if for the primary amount of time that the people are going to be in these houses nearby, it's going to be when there's a normal level of traffic, and above that would be the sound of the trucks.
So this is Chris Menj. Let me address that, and just to second what Greg has said. So the measurements establish the background against which we add 10 decibels to establish the limit. If he had done the measure, and I think Greg mentioned this earlier, if he had done the measurements in the summertime, the background sound levels wouldn't have been as low as 30. They might have been 35 or perhaps even higher, in which case the noise limit would have been 45 or perhaps higher instead of 40. So by choosing a very quiet period, it's a particularly conservative assessment, and I commend them for picking a quiet period for looking at the worst case impacts on the town. I agree with what they did. I think it was very carefully done.
I would say that probably 90% of the year is when there's going to be a lot of traffic out on the main road. Adding to that will be the traffic of 160 bays, even if half of those have trucks in them moving. That's a question, but okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Terry. And again, I apologize. What we're trying to do is just keep the questions to the noise study. I know there are other questions, and I know we didn't get through all the questions last time. We apologize. We encourage people to write in, and there will be more time, and we're hoping to get to traffic tonight. I'm just trying to stick to the noise questions right now. So it's certainly not that I'm not trying to answer your question. I apologize, but we're just trying to stick to the noise because that's what we just discussed. The next, I see somebody here, but it just says dot. There's just a dot. The next person has a question. So I'm not sure.
Hi.
I don't know how. Oh, hi. How are you?
There I am. Good. Okay. How are you?
Fine, thanks.
Suzanne, can you hear me? Hi, Suzanne Edelman from South Street. How are you?
Fine, thanks.
This study that we're just discussing, is all up in the building. And there's berms and there's foliage and there's all sorts of things. It sounds like it's deadening the sound, still going to be pretty awful. Still, we have no answers about the effect on Washington Street and on South Street. Has any study been done on those noise levels? I can stand in my front yard and we can hear Washington Street and certainly what's coming in front of our street. When are we going to see some sound studies for that? And when are we going to have a plan for South Street? This past week, or excuse me, just last night, we had a traffic advisory committee meeting regarding South Street. Tried to get some answers and help with how we can help ourselves with the 555 project. Didn't get too much support there. So my question is, have we done studies on Washington Street on what that sound impact is going to be and on South Street? And also, when are we going to have a plan for how we're going to help out the South Street neighbors? So that's my question.
Okay.
What's the plan?
Okay, great. Thank you. In regards to South Street and Washington Street, would the developer like to answer any questions in regards to that?
Yeah, on the noise study, I don't think we'd be doing noise studies on Washington or South. With respect to the plan, you mean a plan for traffic mitigation on South Street? Is that what you're asking about? You're muted. I'm assuming that's what you mean. Okay, so what we've said in previous meetings is that, you know, we're going to instruct everybody at our facility not to use South Street. And if we can come up with a mechanism, physical, signage, anything else, we will do it. We will pay for it. We're doing a bunch of improvements at the intersection of Hopping Brook and Washington, and South Street is a little bit further down. If there's anything we can do to stop the traffic on South Street, we will do it.
Okay, so my next question is, directly behind us runs Hopping Brook Road. I'm going to dub it the Hopping Brook Speedway right now, because every single truck that's coming down there is Jake braking, and we can hear that all the time. So you multiply that toward all the new ones that are coming in and coming out, fully loaded trucks coming down Hopping Brook. What do we do about that? That's a lot of noise.
Yeah,
Have we taken that into consideration when you're doing your studies about the Jake braking of fully loaded tractor trailer trucks coming down Hopping Brook and the effect on this neighborhood in Washington Street?
No, you know,
Have we taken that into consideration? Because it happens and you can hear it and it's very loud. And you multiply it times how many trucks will be coming down, coming in, coming out. What's the effect there? So has a study been done and are we going to do it?
we have not done the study. I don't think we're required to do one. Is that right, Greg, Peter?
You should do one. You should be required to do one when you're talking about the number of trucks that are going in and out, fully loaded, coming down Hopping Brook Road, and they're Jake braking. Everyone can hear it. What's the effect then? I think that's a very serious situation, and I think that needs to be looked at.
And
we're
I
talking
agree.
about
I
the
agree.
top. We're talking about the building.
I think
What
that's
about
a
coming
huge
down
concern.
here?
There's
It's
a
a
lot of
huge
houses that
concern.
are over off of South Street, so that whole area. So I think that's a huge
Absolutely.
concern. So I think
And the other
in regards
concern
to
is
studying that noise study. Yeah.
and while I've got the floor, one more moment, we're talking
Certainly.
about huge, fully loaded tractor trailers coming down that hill, crossing over the rail trail. What kind of carnage can you imagine that would be on a Saturday and Sunday if you're proposing this is going to be a 24/7, 365 operation, and that rail trail is used all the time? How are you going to stop those trucks when it comes to people crossing over the rail trail? That's very serious and that needs to be considered. And I hope we'll discuss that next meeting.
Thank you very much. And in regards to
Thank
that
you.
study, thank you very much. In regards to the study, I think that's a very good point. Hearing the noise coming down, that's going to be a lot of trucks coming back and forth, especially the entrance and down South Street. I think that we need some noise study in regards to that. And then they may be hearing the noise up, all the way up the whole road there. So I don't know what the rest of the members think, but it's certainly a concern to me, because I know South Street is right there, and there's another road that again, I apologize, I don't remember the road that comes in from the backside of South Street there, so.
And what is
I think
that
that's a
called?
concern.
That like road that
Sorry, I don't know what it's
dog
called.
leg.
Yeah. But
Dave,
I
I
don't know.
completely agree with you, and I have to say I have reservation when I hear a comment like, well, I don't think we have to do that. I would think we would just want to do that.
Karen, Jason, very well put, and I completely agree, David. Thank you.
Okay. So I'm not sure who that would go to in regards to, if that's something that goes to Greg, or who that is, but that's what we'd like done. Certainly a very big concern.
So the question is, so you would like us to augment the noise study to include Brook, Washington, and South Street?
South Street, yeah.
Well, I'll ask the traffic engineers as to whether or not that type of study would be conclusive. Because I'm just logically thinking, there are already trucks that drive along those roads, right? So I don't think we're going to be producing anything louder than that which is already on those roads. That's the first assumption. The second assumption, or probably statement, is that the volume will certainly increase on Washington Street. Now, I know that we had already talked about fuzzy math. We touched about it in the last call, or the last time we met, and somebody mentioned it tonight. Keep in mind that, on Washington Street, we are only adding 2 to 4% volume to that particular, and I see people cringing already. When we talk about traffic, we're going to talk about those particular numbers. The fuzzy math that I heard last time went from 20% all the way up to 95%, if I remember correctly. Our traffic engineer really, wants to address that tonight and tell everybody what the real calculation is on it. So if you can take my word for it for the time being, the amount of traffic that we will put on Washington is about a 2 to 4% increase. Assume that I'm telling the truth for the moment. If that's the case, we can all conclude that, number one, we're not putting anything louder than what is already on that particular road. Number two, we're increasing the volume, but to what extent? I don't know if that, to Greg, would we be able to produce a study that's conclusive?
I just think we should stick with noise right now, because we seem to have deviated and people are waiting on the call to talk about noise. And we keep pushing the commenters back to noise. And I think the presenter needs to stick with the noise right now too. I'm sorry, but we have to be fair here.
But that was an answer to the noise question.
Well, but you're moving into numbers of traffic and throwing fuzzy math around, and like, let's stay positive, not normative.
Okay. So next question, I believe, is Joe.
My name is Joe Mastrangelo on 84 Dunster Road, and I've been listening to the sound numbers and what was being presented. And I think, as in any scientific study, there's a margin of error. And a lot of that would come from, and why I think that way is because of my experience. I've worked on 2 trucking docks, one Holmes Freight in Natick and Pilot Freight Carriers in Southborough. Holmes had about 50 bays for trucks. Pilot had about 30 bays. When 30 trucks start their engines at the same time, the noise is deafening. And during the winter months, that you have to also include diesel fume, blue smoke that comes from everywhere. I would just ask the board to keep in mind one simple question when all these data is being pushed, and we are a society driven by data. The simple question is this: would you live on the other side of the sound barrier, on where the facility has 160 bays, that's 20 feet, 40 feet, 60 feet from your property line? I don't think you have to go to Harvard or MIT to figure out the answer is no. That's all I want to say.
Thank you very much. Next, we've got Christine.
Hello, this is Christine Westland, 103 Norfolk Street. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you very much. Good evening.
Thank you. Good evening, and thank you for letting me ask a question. It is related to sound, and I've been trying to look at all the plans. I have a question about the stationary source from rooftop equipment and the height of the berm plus the 8-foot fence or whatever we call that. What is the proposed height? Is it 40 feet or higher for the special permit?
The building height,
Yes.
the variance yielded, Peter, help me out, 52? Or is it higher?
That's right. That's the height for the building.
Okay, so the variance granted was for 52 feet.
So 52 feet with equipment on the rooftop? Is that correct?
Yes.
And the fence and the berm are 35 feet high. I noticed the triangulated diagram that you had. Does that study take into account the rooftop equipment at 52 feet high?
Yes, it does. I was just trying to open the model to get the grade levels for the building and the residents and so forth. But the ability to see the rooftop equipment from the residences, I have not checked the sight lines. It's in the computer model. I don't have that with me right now, but
This is more related to the noise from the equipment.
Yes, it
52
is.
feet
Yeah,
high and a trajectory that, based on that, one of the slides that you showed was triangulating the noise. And it
I
kind of
can
assumes
answer that,
things are
Greg.
gonna be lower than the isolation area.
Right. So we gave Greg all the elevations. So everything's based upon a 3D model that we designed. So he was using the exact location of the sound equipment on the roof and the exact location of the building unit. So each residence that was a receptor. There's a finished grade for each of the homes. There's a finished grade for the building. So you're looking at an abstract illustration, but you're not looking at the 3D model.
Mm-hmm.
So the visual from that is residence, you would not see the rooftop unit because the building is actually set lower than that residential unit at its
Sure.
finished floor.
Would you hear it though? The sound, I'm talking about the attenuation of the sound.
Right. That's what Greg's study proved.
Because of the line of sight.
Whether it's a line of sight or not, I don't have the information in front of me to be able to answer that, but I can tell you what the source, the sound levels are. And let me direct you to my presentation. So if I can reshare again.
Okay.
Okay. The rooftop equipment, with all of it running, is 22 dBA up to 32 dBA at the residential locations R6 and R8. I don't know if that answers your question in whole, but that's very low compared to what is already out there in the middle of the winter with snow on the ground.
No, that does answer it. I hadn't noticed the rooftop one because I was wondering obviously it's going to be higher than the isolation, the berm and all that. So I was wondering how that was being attenuated or factored in.
By distance and roof edge shielding. And I believe unfortunately I don't have the 3 dB axis three-dimensional axis right now. But there certainly will be a break of line of sight by the roof edge, whether or not it's broken by the barrier itself. I'd have to look at that. I don't know offhand. I know we have that information. I just don't have it in front of me.
Okay, no, that was my question. I think my other questions have been addressed on the simultaneous sources, which is still a concern. I understand it's logarithmic, but the person who just spoke before me about multiple trucks running at the same time kind of has a point. So that's it. Thank you very much for hearing me out, answering my question.
Thank you for your comment.
Great, thank you very much. And again, I appreciate if we could keep it to the noise study and then we'll go into the traffic after. I think we'll answer one more question here, and then I've got two people that I guess have tried to email in that have questions. I believe the next person is Mr. Mitri. How are you this evening? Oh, you must be muted. We can't hear you, unfortunately. Is that on his side, or is that? That's his side. We can't hear you, unfortunately. Unfortunately, I'm sorry, we can't hear you. I'll come back to you. We can't hear you, unfortunately. I'm sorry. No one can hear you.
Dave, I have two people in the chat that have typed in questions. Do you want me to read
I think
them?
it's, is that Gary Donlin?
No. Yeah. No, I have a Gary Radatori, and I have.
Okay.
Can I read it?
Certainly.
He's from 14 Old Surrey Lane, and he's asking that according to studies, truck backup beeping averages are between 97 and 112 decibels. And his question is, how is the presenter saying the sound is only 40 decibels with this information?
Thank you, Karen.
Yep.
Yes, I'd be pleased to answer that. He is right. We've measured more like 90 dBA. Those levels are given at 10 feet. That's the way the providers of backup alarms have usually qualified their units, and the regulation is only that the tone be audible at a distance behind the truck. The Department of Labor and OSHA are a little bit less specific about what levels need to be achieved, as I recall. As sound propagates away from a source, it decreases with distance, and the greater the distance, the lower the sound level. And that's really the reason why sound levels we're looking at from backup alarms with the attenuation of the barrier tend to be quite low. Have I answered your question?
I don't know because I'm reading somebody else's, but I think that you did attempt to answer that. I have another one. It is from Jackie Avery. Her address is 105 Whitney Street. She asks, does truck decibel level change with the weight of a truck? If so, were the statistics presented with full trucks versus half full trucks versus empty trucks, or are you using an average? And if it is an average, would a full truck be louder than presented in the study?
That's an important question. Trucks make noise depending upon the engine RPM. The higher the engine RPM, irrespective of, pretty much irrespective of the load, it basically dictates how loud it is. So a loaded truck driven at low RPM quietly and slowly ends up being a little bit quieter than an empty truck being driven harder at a higher RPM. So it really does depend upon engine speed, not so much on load. Load is a factor with respect to exhaust sound, a low frequency sound that comes out of the stack. Now the sound levels that we've used are based on measurements that we made in a trailer yard, much like the one that's being proposed here. There are other sources of traffic noise, and the noise levels that I've compared that we use tend to be about 5 dB louder than the ones that are used for computer modeling by the Federal Highway Administration for highway noise. And so we're comfortable that the numbers that we have are reasonably, conservatively high anyways.
Okay, I have another one. Joe Cooper from Rockland Street. Dave, I think that's the street we were trying to remember.
Okay.
Can you be a little more specific and a little more, have a stronger concrete answer for what the impact would be on the sound measurement of the baseline with an impact? You stated it with foliage, but what about when the trees aren't there?
No, we did not. We assumed there were no trees. Foliage was not included in our model. So we essentially have an unfoliated condition as part of our computations.
But you did have trees that didn't have leaves on them, so correct? So you did trees
I think
stand.
what you're referring to is the measurements that we did, not the computations that we did. The measurements that we did, it was obviously during the winter. Hardwood trees were defoliated, and softwood trees that were out there certainly still were in needles. Now, would sound levels go up or down? Well, really, that's not so much during the winter with during the summer with leaves on trees. There's a little bit of attenuation of sound from distant sources, but there's also more noise associated with leaf flutter. And, for having done this over the years, sound levels in the middle of the winter generally a lot quieter than they are during the summer. Have I answered your question?
I don't know, because I'm asking it, like I said, for somebody else. Dave, do you want to go back to the raised hands now? I mean,
yes.
There are like 14 more questions that have been typed into.
I agree. And then I've got two people that have tried to, so I'll answer them in between, but I believe we'll try and go back to Mr. Mitri and see if his volume is fixed.
Thank you, Greg.
If he has a question. Yes,
You're
thank you.
welcome.
I don't know if I see he's there. He's talking again, but I can't hear him.
This is Joe Cooper. That was my question that Karen just asked. I was wondering if I could clarify.
Certainly. Okay.
Yeah, so my question really was about the clear cutting that occurred on the property a few months back. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that clear cutting occurred prior to the measurements that you took, Mr. Tochi. Is that correct?
There was partial clear cutting, yes.
Okay, so when you measured the baseline on the property, that was after the company without authorization had clear cut those trees. And the net impact of that would have been to lower the baseline, correct?
It may have, if there's no wind, it might have lowered it a little bit, yes.
Okay, so I just wanted that to be, shared with the planning board that clear cutting those trees, CRG, when it did that without authorization, did so possibly knowing that, I don't know, a question that we should ask CRG is if they knew that would be done prior to a baseline sound study with knowledge that would have an impact of lowering the baseline. And then the other question for Mr. Tochi is whether it would be possible, I believe it would, since your presentation had figures about foliage impacts, to update your figures to take into account the state of the land as it was prior to that unauthorized clear cutting.
I don't know how exactly that would be done. It'd be a bit of a speculation if we tried to do that. It would be done by sort of knowing where the microphone was located and knowing what was foliated at the time of the microphone was installed, and then knowing what area was clear cut, and then assuming that sound is propagating from outside, you might be able to make an estimate. Now, remember that sound levels are reduced by about 1 dB per 100 feet of dense foliage. Dense foliage is foliage you can't see through. It's very rare to be able to have foliage density that high in this area. So I think practically speaking, it would be probably not a very large change in sound level. Of course, on the other hand, one might argue, well, what would have been had you not had snow on the ground? Well, probably would have been higher. So there are arguments that go back and forth. It's not an unreasonable question that you have, and perhaps the way to look at it is to see, well, outside the clear-cut area, what does the foliage look like? How dense does it look? And might it be reasonable to use the ISO assumption of sound of attenuation with distance for the tree removal, the tree area that was removed? So it is something that could be looked at, but I think it'd be small at most.
Can I also clarify that it was not CRG that cut down the trees? Go on record with that. It was the current owner of the property.
Okay. Okay. I want to go back to Mr. Mitri. I don't know if the sound has been. You need to hit *6.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, yes. Thank you very much. Good
No,
evening.
thank you. Good evening. Thank you for giving me the chance. Just to give my name is Wami Mitri. I live on Winthrop Street. I have also an engineering company that works a lot on the biotech facilities in Boston. We do a lot of air handling units, power generators like diesel generators, and loading and unloading of trucking. The one thing I would say, based on the data that I saw, I would love to buy the same equipment they're showing in their tables, because it just doesn't make sense to me. A truck, for example, a heavy loaded truck going from 0 to 30 miles per hour, published, and this is published, and I can send the published data, is actually 80 dBA. A semi-heavy truck or an empty truck on startup to 30 miles per hour is actually 73 dBA. So I would love to buy a truck that's 22 dBA at this point. A generator, let's go to the generator now, which I found another thing. We do a lot of generators. A 50 kilowatt generator, a diesel generator, 30 seconds after it needs to kick in, its dBA is 85 dBA, 85. A 1500 kilowatt generator emits 105 decibels. Again, I would love to buy the generators they quoted on this job, because if they do it, we can make a lot more money for the town that way. If you attenuate the noise from an industrial silencer, you can only attenuate it 15 to 20 dBA, okay? So coming in, you show 12. I would love to see that generator at 12 dBA, number one. Secondly, air handling unit. I'm assuming the building is going to have air handling units, correct?
Yes.
Air handling units at 90% working generates between 63 and 83 dBA 1 meter away. So the data, and on top of everything, your table did not show the combined octave band, which you said was not put in that place. Because I know Terry asked you that question as well. So with that, all that data, so that's when we talk about voodoo maps that we get presented all the time. So I've never seen a truck with the noise you tell me. I've never seen a small generator or large generator, like you say, generating 12 dBA, really, and an air handling unit that you show 22. The town needs to look at the specs that this developer is going to use for this project before we believe this data, because it is not believable one bit. And I do this day in and day out, day in and day out. And before we take the noise calculation at hearsay, we demand to see the cut sheets of the air handling unit, the generator, how it's going to be installed, where it's going to be installed before you give us data like this. Thank you to the town.
Thank you very much.
I'd be pleased to provide that.
Yeah, thank you. Would like to see it, please.
Sound levels that you were quoting, I believe, were sound levels at the receptor locations.
No.
12 dB is, that's awful low, isn't it?
Well, at
No,
the
no.
source locations, right? I think he said 1 meter away from source. So distance matters. You know, just as just a matter of, you know, just information, you know, the next step, I mean, would be for us to submit full building, you know, architectural, structural, mechanical, electrical drawings for everything in the building. So there'd be no surprises as to what we put in this building. That will all be subject for approval.
This is Chris Menge. In Greg's report, he lists all of the source levels for the equipment that he used in order to then propagate the sound levels to the community. And Mr. Mitri, I think you would find that the source levels that he cites in his report are higher than many of the ones that you just mentioned. So he's used conservative values for his source levels.
No, he did not.
Yes, he has. Yes,
He did. When he shows a generator at 12 dBA, that's not conservative, Levash.
That's not the source level, sir. That is the received level in the community over the noise barrier. And Craig, if you would bring up your
Yes.
from the report that shows the source levels, I think
Right,
you
the air
would understand.
handling unit on top of the building on the source barrier, that needs to be taken into account as well, right? And I don't think you took that into account. The air handling unit, I'm assuming you're not burying the air handling unit, are you? Or you're putting them on top of the building?
They're on top of the building and they're makeup air units.
My point, how tall is the building?
About 50 feet, but I think others can.
50 feet, how tall is the barrier?
Mr. Chairman, through the chair, we did all of this as based on a 3D model with exact elevations. They were provided to Kavanaugh Tachi. They printed a report. The report was then vetted by a peer review engineer that the town hired. All I can say is that these were done. Mr. Mitri is just citing incorrect information, and I would hope. I would
like to propose to the town free at cost to evaluate that that report and then provide a debunk on that report. Would you allow me to do that? Free of charge. Would you allow me to do that?
I like the idea.
Mr. Chairman, I think we need to move on to the next question, please.
Thank you very much. I see silence at this point. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Len Epstein.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Len Epstein. I'm at 81 Jackson Drive in Holliston. And by the way, I happen to be an abutter to the northwest of the project. I brought this up at the last meeting with the planning board. There's been no noise analysis on the Holliston side. And this is a Holliston project. We are very close to it, and we are the nearest abutter to this project. There is, it also brought up the fact that there's a noise barrier that's been put in, and the noise barrier does not extend to the northwest corner of the project, strangely enough, which we're in direct line of the warehouse. There's no.
Mr. Chairman, there is a barrier that extends
now it's
around.
brought up that there's an emergency generator on that side as well. And Mr. Mitri just brought up that the noise that the generator creates an extreme amount of noise. And now it's exposed to the abutters on the Holliston side. No analysis has been done and no protection's been done by the contract. I'm finished with my questions.
Thank you. Would you like to, was there somebody that would like to answer that?
The barrier does extend to the northwest portion of the site. We did carry it around. The Tachi Kavanaugh study did not extend to that section of the site. That receptor that is 81 Jackson, I will plot it on a plan, and we will do that for the next meeting.
So Peter, are the other houses on the north side, they're further away from the
Significantly further away, yes.
Yeah, okay, so whatever results are derived from the receptors that we currently have on Mr. Tachi's report, the decibel levels at the receptors that are going to be further away from the building are going to be lower than that, correct?
Correct.
Right.
Peter, while you're doing that, would you be open to also including Holliston Woods. I have a couple of people in the chat, like on Monroe Drive, that are interested and wondering why they weren't included in the sound study as well, and they weren't a receptor.
What street would that
They're
be?
even further away, but
Well,
yeah,
then you can prove to them that it won't be a problem,
understood. Don't
right?
disagree. Don't
Um,
disagree.
I do have an address of 94 Monroe Drive.
Okay.
Okay. Next, I believe we have John.
Hi, I'm John Adler at 251 Gorwin Drive.
Good evening.
The sound is probably one of the least concerns that we have overall. But my question is, based on the calculations in the computer model and possibly now additional modeling for other abutters, is there any consequence that's anticipated if these estimates are exceeded by the sound? And an extension of that is Frank mentioned, they have no obligation to perform a certain kind of study. For example, does the planning board have the power to create either consequences if claims are subsequently violated, or criteria? For example, there might be ways to protect the residents, our neighbors along South Street, other than putting up a sign. There might be actual consequences.
John, I will answer that for you. I think probably we might also toss it to town council, but we are not an enforcement agency. We're just a regulatory board. So we set the parameters, but we have truly no enforcement power. That belongs to the select board and the police.
Got it.
Can I ask Chip Nyland, are you off of mute or are you on mute?
Yeah, I'm here.
Can you comment as to whether or not doesn't the state, isn't there some agency that could bang us over the head if violations were?
Well, I think that what we've talked about is two levels of enforcement. One is internally on Hopping Brook Road, which is what we control. And the second is what takes place out on 16 and others. And what we've talked about doing is having traffic monitoring. In addition to the barriers and to the signage, we need a way to monitor that.
Yeah, we're talking about the noise there. Let's just say the noise. I mean, if there's a noise violation, is there some regulatory agency like the DEP that could write us a nasty letter and hit us in the head and stuff like that?
Yes.
As Greg and Chris have both indicated, DEP and their regulation says that you cannot create noise. And what they've done is it's probably the most open-ended regulatory standard, but they followed that up with a policy, which is the 10%, 10 decibels above background. And they have the authority, which they have exercised, as people in this room are well aware of, for makeup units and for HVACs. And when there's an increase above 10 decibels above the background noise, they have come in and they have required mitigation and have imposed sanctions. So there is clearly an enforcement mechanism at the state level.
Okay.
And it generally goes through the Board of Health to the Mass DEP.
Yes.
Okay. Next is Steve.
Hi, Steve McElhenney, 12 Carriage House Way. I do have a question in terms of the background sound levels. I think when you pulled your graph up, you showed you took it over a week-long period. Karen from the board asked about the snow, and you said you took the Worcester snow conditions. But I thought as one of the things you said there that you would normally take the lowest level. But since there was snow on the ground, because there was snow in Worcester, you decided to take the average and not the lowest level. I thought the lowest level for the background noise showed 27 decibels, and then you said that you used 30 decibels as your background level noise as part of your report.
Let's take a look at it. Yeah, if I could share my screen with you. Let's see, share, and it's this one here. The lowest level is right here. That's about 26 decibels.
Yep, and then you said you
The
took
average
the
instead.
average because there was snow, but you were supposed to take the lowest?
Yeah, we took, in fact, when we did the computations, we added the control that if this were to become, if we were forced into using this number, we'd still be within the 10 dB above 26 or above 36. So,
But if you take the 26, and now you take into account that you took the noise level after those trees were legally removed, and that could have potentially even reduced that 26 even lower. Now we're talking about a 24 or 23 potentially, which would then bring us to 33.
maybe, maybe not. I mean, the benefit, the change in attenuation with by the removal of the trees, that is, it may be a dB, and it may actually be an increase because of foliage noise, and even defoliated trees make noise. So it's not clear to me that that's an absolute that sound levels would have been lower had measurements been done under the same snow condition with the trees that were supposedly removed prior to our involvement.
Not supposedly, they were removed.
I know they were
I'm
removed,
sure you
but
would have had I'm sure that lowest level you're showing is a non-winded period. It only makes sense that would be the lowest level. So therefore, the lowest level with the trees would be in a non-winded period as well.
Oh boy, could you repeat that, please?
I said, I'm sure that lowest level showing of the 26 was time when there wasn't wind. It only makes sense that's when you would have the lowest. Therefore, with the trees there, it would still be a period of no wind. And I would argue that you would have even a lower decibel level.
Mm-hmm.
This is Chris Mensch for the town. I guess I would like to point out to the residents and to the select board that this wintertime measurement and this particularly low level that was measured during a period when there was a lot of snow on the ground, I think is anomalous. And I also think that the wintertime measurements, think about when you are affected by noise as community members. The wintertime, you've got your windows closed, and when you're indoors, and when you're outdoors, you're bundled up, you're not enjoying your patios in the middle of winter the way you would in the summertime or the spring or the fall, or have your windows open. So I would argue that this is a particularly high bar for the project to achieve. And if we look at the other days of the week, we see the minimums are above 30. And so I think that Greg's approach to taking a value that was 30 is a very conservative approach and is very protective of the community. That's my opinion about this overall assessment.
Yeah, not that I disagree or agree, but I thought I heard him say during his presentation you were supposed to take the low point. So whether you took that study now or that's when it was taken. The low point was 26.
The DEP doesn't require you to take the lowest point that you ever measured. It's a matter of judgment in many cases. And in this case, I think his judgment was reasonable.
I'm just saying, I thought what I heard in his presentation that you were supposed to take the low point. Now, whether I misheard or he misspoke, then that either of those could have been the case. Then I still think if 26 is the lowest, it should be 26, but that's one person's opinion.
And we didn't because it's anomalous. Judges anomalous. It never got repeated.
Always a low point is going to be a low point. It's not going to be repeated. That's the definition of a low point. I'm not a science guy, but that's a definition of a low point is your lowest point. My next question is, if you have trucks coming in all the time, can you still consider it to be transient noise?
Beg your pardon?
If you have trucks coming and going all the time, I mean, do we still consider that transient noise? There's always going to be noise from those trucks.
We've considered that, and we've looked at the highest transient sound levels that are likely to occur. And so we've got that covered. We've also looked at continuous ambient noise produced by stationary equipment.
Okay. And then my final, it's not a question, it's just a comment, and I don't know if you took it into account or not. The prevailing wind comes towards the Medway line. I don't know if you took that into account or not when you're looking at your noise study, but the prevailing wind, and there is documentation we can provide, but it shows that it comes directly to the Medway line in that direction.
Sure, in terms of computations, we've always, the modeling is done with downwind propagation. So that's tends to give a high estimate of sound levels at receptor locations. With respect to wind direction during the measurements that were made in December, I have that information. It's not displayed in any of the figures I have here.
All right, I'd like to thank the board and you guys for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve.
Next, I see Mark Bunker.
Hello? Can you hear
Good
me?
evening.
Good
Yes.
evening. Hi, Mark Bunker, 53 Green Street. I live in downtown Holliston. I'm not directly affected by any of this, but I am an engineer. And I think with the 300 people on this call, we've talked a lot about numbers here and graphs like we're showing right here. And logarithmic scales aren't what people normally think in. And I think it's important that the experts on the call here give a sense of what a 3 dB difference is. I think it was discussed on the call that if you have one truck and it's 40 dB, that's the noise of the truck going by or idling. And you have another one simultaneously doing that. That doubles the sound. That's a 3 dB increase. That's how logarithms work. So if you're looking at these graphs and seeing a 6 dB or a 10 dB or a 15 dB difference, that's multiplying times 2 every single time you go up by 3.
Can I respond to your question?
Yes.
With continuous sound, a 3 dB increase is barely perceptible. A 6 dB increase is clearly perceptible. And a 5 dB increase is clearly perceptible. And a 10 dB increase is a doubling of perceived loudness. A 15 dB increase is the data scatters, but that's considered to be normally accepted as a perceived quadrupling of loudness. So
Okay.
the perception of sound doesn't even follow logarithms all that well.
Okay. Well, now you're actually trying to help us because the numbers don't mean really anything to the layperson.
Understood. Yes,
So-
and I appreciate your bringing that up. But you know, it's again, I think we've always found that the better way of understanding how perception is going to work with respect to this facility is how it compares with what's already there. But so if that's been a help, that's great.
Yeah, and I think it's also important for everybody to think about the graph you just had up is the steady state sound. Most people aren't bothered by steady state sounds, I don't think. They're just kind of humming in the background. It's the transient sounds that really get your attention. And so I don't see curves. I don't see scatter plots for transient sounds. And I think should be considered, even though it's not a part of any kind of regulation. That's what people are going to notice.
Mm-hmm. In a sense, we've tried to replicate, it's customary in our business to represent the transients as 1 percentile sound levels, for example, and compare those to the 90th percentile sound levels. That's the lowest level that typically gets reached in a monitoring period. And so that scatter of sound that happens when a car goes by or a bird chirps or the wind blows, that's meant to be a way of grabbing a hold of the variability of sound in the environment. And we tried to do that with the way we show the data. I'm not sure of any other way to do it that would be more telling than that, but I understand the issue of trying to display sort of volatility.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, next we have John.
Hi, John Giacobbe, 3 Summit Road in Medway. I'm a direct abutter. I live at the end of the cul-de-sac. I've lived here for 23 years, and we don't hear anything ever except birds chirping. I don't hear anything from Hopping Brook. I don't hear anything from Route 16, 495. I guess my question is, we don't know who the tenant is, so how do we know what the truck activity is when the building is first built? And how do we know what the tenant is going to be in 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now? How do we measure all of that by just looking at the computer graphs? I mean, my wife and I work from home. It's clearly has been stated that there's going to be, we're going to hear this. We're going to hear trucks 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. We will live with this for the rest of our lives and for the generations to come. I guess I'd like to know how you come up with, we don't know if it's going to be every 10 seconds, every 20 seconds, every 30 seconds. Someone said it's going to be 12 times an hour. How do we know these things? What if is it 20 times an hour? Are we going to be getting woken up every single night? Are we not going to be able to enjoy our way of life? I don't know how you can sit behind these numbers and tell me that the sound is not going to affect the lives of all of us here in this neighborhood and the residents of Holliston as well. I appreciate the board. I appreciate you giving me the time to speak, and I've been on every single call since last summer, and it's quite refreshing to see the number of people on the call this time voicing their opinions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We had 2 people that wanted to speak. That I believe the first person is Gary Donlin.
Chairman, I didn't have the raise hand function on my laptop, so I used the chat function, but I did so before you announced that you'd like to handle things in a category first of noise and then traffic. My issues are specifically around traffic and trucks, so I'll hold them respectfully until we get to that topic. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Next, we have Mary Greendale. Mary, are you there?
I am here.
Hi, Mary.
Hi there. My question is, I'm wondering if CRG has established a facility anywhere else in the country that is as close to neighborhoods as this one will be, and what the results have been, from neighbors, what kinds of, have there been issues, complaints, that kind of thing. I've looked on their website and I've seen that most of these cubes seem to be on highways, as off of interchange off of the highway. So just wondered if there is any other place where some facility like this is near a neighborhood as close as this is. Same with the downtown. That's the other piece of it.
The company's so large. My answer is yes. Can I think of any specifically at the moment? No. What I will say is that, when things like this come up, I mean, obviously there's a lot of negative noise. There's a lot of speculation. There's a lot of innuendo and things, let's say accusatory comments, not necessarily the positive, towards a developer that tries to do some of these things. And we understand that. We run into this quite often. What I did recently, however, is I challenged my IT department and my marketing department to basically find out what kind of negative reviews were out there about our buildings. And the answer is none, right? So I can tell you that every time I've done a building like this, and I've been doing this for 30 years, and doing it for all different companies, the front end comments are like this. I mean, it's almost like you can write the script every time, and we hear about noise, and we hear about traffic and all these things. But after we end up building the building and actually putting it into operation, very, very rarely do we hear operating complaints from people, because again, our studies are done in a conservative manner. And what we usually do is assume the worst case and seldom, if never, breach those particular numbers.
Okay, that's reassuring. I guess I would just again ask if there's a way that you could quantify a similar situation. I mean, it just seems like you're plunking down in the middle of a highly congested, right out of the center of, close to the center of town, not right out of the center of town, that kind of thing. And I understand it's an industrial park. I'm not quibbling. That was, but I would just like some idea of where there's a community, 15,000 people. I mean, is that, just wondering. I'm done.
Oh, you are, okay. Thank you very much, Mary. Next, I have a request from Emma. Would like to speak?
Hey, everybody, this is Andres from Curve Street. My daughter grabs my Zoom, so sorry about that. Part of my question was asked by the gentleman in Medway, so thank you very much. But there is more of a comment, I guess, and it's a common sense on noise. I moved from Boston to Holliston 3 years ago, and probably one of the few people who can say that I moved to a noisier place in my life. Holliston is actually a very extremely noisy town. I mean, I've got a ton of traffic all around. Everywhere I walk my dog, I can barely talk on the phone with my mom because there's trucks all over. So why are we still having this conversation about noise, about 3, 5, 15 decibels when we're already in an incredibly noisy town? Even if we don't realize it, if you've lived here for 40 years, you might actually be numb to that noise level, but I'm not. And adding more noise, be it 3, 5, 10, or hopefully not 15 decibels, seems like absolutely a no-brainer to the quality of life of this town. So why are we even considering adding more noise to this town? I mean, how is this even on the table? Sorry, that's it. I mean, why is this on the table? That's the question, really.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you very much. And that's a very good question. It is a very good question. Thank you for bringing that up. Next, we have Andy.
Hi, Mr. Chairman, Andy Rodenheiser. I actually live at 104 Fisher Street in Medway. I have
How are you?
I'm well, thank you. My home is off of Fisher Street. Holliston is actually one of my property lines. And I also own property in the industrial park at 325 Hopping Brook. I'm speaking personally this evening. The transient noise, I think, is the biggest issue. Although if I lived up on, Old Surrey or up in that area, then I would understand the concern about forklifts, loading and unloading trailers and dock plates and all the noise associated with that, which I didn't hear anything addressed and would like to hear it addressed. But I think the importance of dealing with the transient noise of the trucks, at 300 a day, I'm guessing that's 150 trips in and 150 trips out, hopefully, and not 600 total. If it's 300 in and 300 out, then that's horrifying to me, because as the trucks lumber up as it is now up Hopping Brook Road, I can hear them, considerably. And when they come back down, I hear the jake breaking all the time, just like the residents along South Street and the other road that I can't remember. The issues that have noise propagating to the residents are far more or far greater than just around the property that is the subject to the permit. And it's a far greater impact from a noise perspective than just on the property itself. And, there are ancillary issues that come from trucks that are parked throughout the park. As we see what's happening now with Web Industries, there's just trucks parked on the side of the road. Sometimes they're parked there all night, just idling, and you can hear them. And, if this becomes a facility where there's 300 trucks, you're going to have trucks that need to overnight because their requirements to not be on the road because of DOT standards. Where are they going to park and where are they going to idle? It's essentially a campground. Frequently, I'm sorry?
We're not sure what that is.
Yeah, I'm not either. Anyways, a lot of these issues are off-site, and hopefully, if you're going to allow this or go forward with it, you can condition the permit to limit the hours and the days of operation so that at least the residents that are peripheral to the entire industrial park get the benefit of some peace and quiet on a weekend, even if it's 10 days, 10 hours a day. I believe the business should have an opportunity to operate, but operate on a level that isn't 24/7. It's not like there are other facilities in other locations that can't or can take up the slack for something like this. It would greatly benefit the residents of Holliston and those peripheral to Holliston and Medway. I think the discussion around the dumpster, I think he mentioned having an open top dumpster that would be slid inside the building, which I suppose is a possibility. But even, when if that is the case, why not condition all of these things that they said that they would do, or these decibel levels that they said they would maintain, so that they can't exceed it, so that the most conservative representations that have been made this evening are actually conditioned into a decision so that they can't exceed it, and that you have some type of enforcement methodology that allows you to utilize either an engineer or someone trained to actually provide the data that shows a violation. Because the science that's required, clearly we've heard how complicated it is. And for our, building commissioner or zoning enforcement officer to be expected to try to sort these issues out is, it's a Herculean task and probably beyond his capacity, with all due respect to him. I recall, I think it was Atlantic Beverage, ended up having to move their equipment off the roof and onto the ground because of the noise that it was making. I remember Peter driving around on Sundays trying to find where the noise was coming from. And, he was frustrated trying to resolve a problem. That's it. I just hope you consider all these things, because a lot of people are going to be impacted, as one gentleman said, forever. This facility will really impact the community, beyond. And I'm not sure a 24/7, 365 permit is wise.
Now, let me ask you, because you have a business up there, is there any group, and I don't know why I don't know this, but, for instance, all the businesses that are up there have some sort of meeting, or there's some sort of communication between the businesses that are up there in regards to that whole park? I don't know if there is. There is.
Not
okay.
really.
Oh,
I mean, I talk with Wayne Griffin occasionally. I talk with with a few of the other business owners, Rich Gordon at Bay State, American Durafilm. It's not like we go to the beach or hang out at night. It's
Well,
just
I'm
usually
just wondering
business
if there's,
oriented.
I
No, we're
just
not
was wondering.
organized against this. I think we're all going to be impacted. Most of us are owner operators of our buildings. And, I've made a commitment. I have, 100, 200 trucks. And I don't park them at my building. The guys all take them home. You rarely see, more than 10 or 15 of my trucks, moving about at any given time inside the park.
Okay.
And I'm not against the truck traffic during the day. I do think a truck restriction on South Street would benefit, from a noise, speed, traffic management. Even my own trucks, and I've talked with residents along South Street, and I've given them, some of the organized groups my phone number and said, call me if there's a problem with one of my trucks. We have GPS in every one of them, but I control all my trucks, more or less. I supervise it. So, but with independent truck drivers, you can't control them. You might think that you can have a restriction that you say you're going to place on them, but they're just that. They're independent. And they may drop a trailer and go get lunch using the tractor, and this happens right now on Karen knows. I call her all the time. They'll leave a trailer just parked there on the road, and it's rude. It's on the corner sometimes. This has nothing to do with this facility, but the truck drivers can't be managed the way you think they can.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Thank
as we approach 10 o'clock, I just want to make sure that the 4 people waiting with their hands up are heard,
I'm done.
even if it
Thank
goes
you.
beyond 10 o'clock.
Thank
And
you
I
very
also
much.
have, Dave, I
Next
also have about 4 more people that have posted on the chat that I did not finish going
Okay.
through. So
I'll go through, there's 3 more people here, first being Andrew. We'll try and go through these quickly. I'm sorry to rush people. I don't know if Andrew is available.
Hi, Andrew Kennedy, 450 Adams Street, Holliston, Massachusetts.
Good evening.
Just have a comment and maybe a proposal here. The group that conducted the study is 100% in agreement with CRG. They have a 100% pass rate on all aspects that they investigated. I propose that there's an independent study conducted by an entity selected by the town with all of the contact of the investigating group restricted to the town members without any contact with CRG, and the cost could be covered by CRG. This way, we wouldn't be selling a town short and using a bias report. That's all.
Well, we've done that, right? So we pay, there's a peer review of our consultant, and he's on the line here tonight.
Well, this is Greg Tachi. We'd certainly be pleased to share our information and our modeling.
Okay. Again, I'm trying to quickly go through these. I've got Terry has another question.
Yes, thank you. One simple question I had. Since this was done during the time of COVID, does that make a difference with the noise levels and the assessments that you made? Wouldn't it be a different case if it was not during COVID, where most people are working from home and not really out on the roads traveling and things like that? That's my question.
That's a good
Thank
point. This is Greg Tachi. Sound levels, we had data down in Cushnet to compare before and during COVID, and but in any event, it is quieter, especially in the evenings and mornings. And by being quiet, the effect is to drive the limit down that we're trying to design to. It makes the limit lower, and it ends up becoming more protective of the community. So, from the community standpoint, I think it's a great advantage.
Okay.
Dave, I have people on the call, again, on this list here that haven't spoken yet. So I'm assuming as long as Joe hasn't spoken before, but we just went into a second round of questions by the system.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but why don't you go with your questions, I guess, that you have people that have.
Okay, so I think that to be fair to them, I have a P. Caramel who also had a COVID statement. So I just want it to be noted that there are, and then a Michelle Minigan who also has a COVID question. So I just think it's important that we know that it's not just one person that has that similar question. And then I have a question from, and I'm just going to read it exactly the way it's typed in. Okay, just to be clear here again. Someone wants to know, his name is Matt Minch. He wants to know, how do you estimate potential noise when there is no named tenant?
That's a good question. What we've assumed is not so much what the tenant is, but what kinds of equipment would be used for a trucking facility, and for the design of the facility as it was given to us. And from our standpoint, whether we do trucking facilities for a number of different operators and developers, and we always use all the data we have for trucks. It's just it's a different user, but it's the same equipment.
And then he asks, will CRG audit their noise estimates post-construction and occupancy?
Absolutely.
And then he asks, if by chance you fail to meet these estimates, what mitigation will you provide the local residents and the town?
We change the operation. So obviously, if we do anything in the building that's out of compliance with regulations, we just can't do it, right? So if something on site breaches the rules and regulations that are imposed upon us, we have to cease and desist that operation or change something on site, right? So if there's a particular component that makes noise and it puts us out of compliance, then we'll move it or get rid of it or redesign it or buy something different. That's basically what we would do. We'd fix it.
Okay, and then the next question, and Frank, this is actually to you as well. And maybe it is something that can come to our next meeting, because I imagine that we are continuing this. Gabrielle Pitcher, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing a name. She would like to know, and I think that Mary Greendale really asked the same question. Can you please give us an exact location where CRG has a building just like you're proposing for Holliston and in very similar conditions with both size, tenant, and proximity to the neighborhoods? And I do echo this as well. I did a lot of research myself, and I've noticed that most of them are very, very close to the highway. And in this situation, you're not. So I think people really would love to see an exact replication, or as close as you can, replication to what you are proposing here. To your point, you feel that you're getting negative information from us. You're getting negative speak, right? So help us frame it positively. Show us that building that is operational today, that is getting this positive feedback from this community, and that they look at your building and they say, man, that's beautiful, and they've done everything that we were asked to do. I'm not being sarcastic. I'm just saying, like, give us that chance. That's what people want, and that's been asked twice in the chat.
You're putting something upon me that wasn't say. So basically, that what was asked of me was, do people complain about these when they're done? And the answer was, no, they don't. Do people go out and advocate and praise and say that's the most beautiful we've ever seen? No, it just doesn't happen. I mean, I myself, when I think something is great, I'm kind of lazy on giving a compliment to a beautiful building or a great business or anything like that. But I think we're all guilty of this. When something negative comes about, we're very quick to hit Twitter and complain about it, give somebody a negative review. That's just human nature. So when you say, you know, what's that?
I don't do that.
Okay, well, I think a lot of people do. So what I would say is we've got a lot of case studies. I could show you a lot of them. I'll send something to the board that really shows some of the stuff that we've done.
Yeah, I think that, you know, showing an aerial view that presents a real location that is going to be in a similar situation. And again, I'm not making this up. I said that Gabrielle has asked that, Debbie Miller has asked that, and Joe has asked that. So, and Jackie has asked that too. So I'm just reading, you know, I'm trying to lump the questions together so that it's easier to get through the questions. And that is a question they would just like to see.
And there's also one more person that would like to ask a question too.
Eddie K would like to see it too. I'm getting a bunch of people popping up now just saying, yes, please. Like, that's what they would love to hear from you. Thank you.
Last person I think is P. Farmel. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly on this here, that would like to speak.
Yes, it's Paul Faramelli, 80 Kent Place.
Oh,
I'm gonna
hi, how are you?
Good, good. And yourself?
Oh, fine, thank you.
I'm gonna try to be very brief. One of the things I did ask was about the COVID's affecting studies, but it's more than just a noise study. It's everything. It's going to be a different world once COVID is over. But anything that's been done during this whole COVID pandemic thing, these numbers are kind of bogus because it doesn't reflect what things are going to end up being. And the other comment is about computer models. Our weathermen use computer models, so they're not always right. So we have to take everything with a grain of salt. This really doesn't belong in Holliston, so please just shut this down. That's it. Thank you.
So on that topic comes up repeatedly. So that the data collection for the traffic was done pre-COVID. So that's conservative in nature.
I'll ask you a very quick question because we didn't get to traffic tonight, but I heard 2 to 4%. Was that total traffic or truck traffic? Because if it's increased traffic by 2%, but increased truck traffic by 50%, that's a major thing. So I want to make sure we're clear on numbers because we can dance around with percentages, but we need to be really accurate because I'm really concerned about these things because this is bad for Holliston. And do you live in Holliston?
Do I live in Holliston now?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, I don't think you'd be pushing this if you lived here. I really don't.
I didn't know if you had anything else at this point that, no? Okay. I believe at this point it's after 10. We tried to answer most of the questions. Was still a lot. We didn't even get to the traffic. So I don't know if there's any board members at this point that would like to continue or would like to propose that we move this to the next meeting.
We got 2 people in the waiting thing. I don't know if they've already gone, but I think why not let them go? We're already up.
Oh, you're right here. Okay, I see Joe.
And then I'm going to propose after these 2 that we be done.
I think that's exactly right.
Because
I don't need to speak. I asked my question through Karen, and thank you, Karen, for posing that.
You're welcome.
Great,
Bingo.
thank you very much.
And there was one.
Okay. One more, Terry, thanks again.
Hi, thank you. And I'm sorry to keep on asking about this question because it still does perplex me a bit. For example, if your baseline is set, say, at 20 dBs, and then these trucks come in and they raise it another, say, 20 or 30 dBs, then that exceeds the limit of the 50, correct? But then if your baseline now is set down around 6 dBs because you're looking at during a COVID period or whatever, I'm just, you know, for example, and then your trucks come in and they're up around 40 or 50, that means the truck traffic can be a heck of a lot louder than it would if your baseline was more centered on that graph is the way that I'm looking at that. So in other words, if your baseline is higher, it's outside of the COVID period and it's higher, then that means they have less room to exceed the 50 dB, which is, or the 40 dB, which is the baseline that they're not supposed to pass. So this is why I'm saying I don't consider, if I'm misunderstanding, please clarify that. But if the dB is set very low, that gives them 30 or 40 dBs to raise the truck noise by. So that is why I keep coming back to this question, because I feel that this is still not clear to me. And again, I'm not a noise engineer, so, but to me, if the baseline was higher, then that means they've got less room to come in and make a lot of noise, and maybe you'd have to have fewer vehicles coming in, et cetera. So I'm just trying to clarify that, if you could help me with that.
Greg, do you want me to try this time?
Go for it.
Sure, Chris. I was only going to add that think of without background, how would you know, how would you judge sound levels without a background to compare it to? It would be hard to do. If you were in the middle of the city, we wouldn't have any problem with trucks. Because there's trucks everywhere, there's noise everywhere, there's mechanical equipment everywhere. But when you start moving to a community, a quiet community, then noise stands out more. And this is why it's a benefit that we're in the quiet level that we have now depresses the limit that we need to design to, causing the barriers to be higher in order to provide more protection. But Chris, go ahead.
Well, I think that's where the confusion lies, is what does the background do? And Terry, what's going on here is that when we establish the background, that establishes the limit. So if we had measured a background of 35 or 40, because we measured during the summer, then our limit would be 45 or 50 rather than 40. So therefore, the trucks would be able to make more noise with the background established at a higher level. So by having the measurements done at a particularly quiet period sets a particularly tough standard for the facility to try to meet it. And so it's particularly protective. We kept saying that, and it doesn't, I know it's a hard thing to understand, but basically we're not allowed to go 10 decibels above whatever the low level that we measured. And that's—
I see. I didn't hear that. I didn't hear that you're not supposed to go. I thought it was a set level of 40 or 50 for the town. I didn't hear you say it had to be 10.
Right.
About. I didn't hear that. Okay.
Okay. That's what's going on. Okay. So
that clarifies it. Okay. Thank you.
And I do think it clarifies it, but I also think, to your point, Greg, is that's why people do move out of cities, though, because they're moving to low background noise. That's what they're seeking. That's their desire. Right. This is why people move to a town like Holliston, except that Mr. Vargas found out it wasn't as quiet as he thought. But that's what we want to also attempt to not have happen, right? Is to have these background noises that are all of a sudden altered all the time. And there's only one more thing that I want to say too, that I keep hearing. And all human beings have a different level of sensitivity to noise. I'm sorry for going personal, but boy, oh boy, I wake up pretty easy in the night. I think my husband would sleep through a hurricane. So I think that different people are going to react differently to noises that happen throughout the day. And even when you are on a busier road, once you become sensitive to the fact that there is noise, you're hearing it all the time. And I don't think it ever really does go into your background. Rustling trees and birds chirping are entirely different than trucks air braking or hitting potholes or emptying dumpsters or clanking as they back up to a loading dock. These are just not natural sounds for us, and they're not soothing sounds. And I think this is what people are trying to understand. So to go back to that question, of Frank, which is we want to see a building that's in a location similar to ours that is operating as harmoniously as possible with that community, I think would be something that we're going to be all interested in looking at. Thank you.
Very good.
Thank you, Karen. I think at this point, I want to thank every single person that's been on this call. And I hope that the people that had a chance to speak, that the applicant somewhat answered the question. I think there's still some questions I think that all of us have. But I appreciate everybody being on the call, and I appreciate all the comments. I guess at this point, we still have to go through the traffic, so we have to discuss the board members when we want to have this, continue this hearing to, because we have to continue this hearing to. We're looking at either not the
2 weeks,
18th, right?
whatever 2 weeks from now is.
Well, we've already got a meeting. Our next meeting's the 18th, right, Karen?
Yes.
What else is on the docket for that?
Nothing, okay. So does that,
So move it to that?
do we want to do it for the 18th?
Wait, do we need to close the public hearing?
Well, we have to close it to a meeting,
Ah,
right? We have to pick a date. And they said that they needed more time anyway, so shouldn't the 18th work well, Karen?
Yes, the 18th will work, yes.
Okay, so motion to close the public hearing tonight and continue it to, or actually it's not closed, motion to continue it to March 18th.
Okay. Do I have a second?
7:15.
I'll second that.
7:15, okay. Josh is seconding in that. Okay, all in favor, I guess, starting with Karen.
Aye.
Josh,
Aye.
Jason,
Aye.
Scott,
Aye.
okay, all right. So we would continue this, and then talk about traffic, and then the rest of, well, I think that gives them enough time in regards to everything else, I guess. Was there anything else before we, okay. I guess the next thing, again, thank you everybody for being on the call, would be if somebody would like to make a motion to end the meeting.
I'm gonna make a
I'll
motion.
make a motion to
shut it
adjourn the
down.
meeting. Oh, there you go. I'll second.
Jinx.
Okay, Josh has made a motion, and Scott, I believe, is seconded. Was that
Yes.
Scott?
Aye.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, Scott is aye. Yes. Josh?
I made the motion, so hell yeah.
Yep, all right. Karen?
Aye.
Jason?
Aye.
And then David. So, thank you, everybody, very much, and have a good evening. We'll see everybody on
Thank
the
you,
18th.
everybody. Have a good one.
Good night.
Thanks so much. Thank you.
Good night.